Chapter 184. Without thinking much, Zhong Shou pulled out his sword, his eyes slightly opened, his eyes red. "You want to break the marriage, then I will beat you up." The stone hall instantly became silent once more. Xian Yuan Tong's eyes turned cold, following which he felt a pungent smell of alcohol charged towards his face. Looking closely at Zhong Shou, not only were his cheeks red, his eyes were totally unfocused. Only then did his face clear up, thinking about how Zhong Shou didn't cultivate internal energy and drank so much wine. Most probably he was drunk. However, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, shaking his head. "Prince, in this world, the strong are respected. No matter how indignant or dissatisfied you are, you still need to have enough strength and influence to have dignity. However, you don't have any of that, so how will you beat me up? This marriage is settled. In the future I will compensate you." Zhong Shou didn't reply, carrying the lightning-toothed sword in his hand, directly stepping over the table and walking towards Xian Yuan Tong. These words were vaguely familiar to him, as if he had heard them before. However, he only felt more and more uncomfortable. The remaining rationality in his brain couldn't be suppressed. He only wanted to find someone to have a good fight with, to beat up all these noisy people and vent his anger. Only then would he be able to ease the anger in his heart. The strong are respected? That's true. Be it 10,000 years later or in this era, it was the strong who could control everything. It was the same. However, these people had never been able to figure out who the true powerhouse was. Since they wanted to talk about the strong being respected, then he would use his sword and his fist to do the talking. At the start, the people in the hall didn't care, only laughing coldly as they looked on. Only when Zhong Shou stepped 60 steps in front of Xian Yuan Tong did they all frown, thinking to themselves that this Zhong Shou was really muddle-headed from his sins. Only Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Yuan's eyes lit up in anticipation. They all thought to themselves that there was going to be a good show to watch. In their hearts, they didn't have any intention to stop him. Instead, they were gloating. The words of these people just now also made them extremely displeased. Chu Shui hesitated. She didn't know what to do in this situation. When Zhong Shou took another 10 steps, Luo Xian glared at him. "How dare you?" This place was suppressed by the supreme force spiritual array, so the force could not penetrate the body. Luo Yan leaped to Zhong Shou's side and waved his sleeve at Zhong Shou. He deliberately wanted to make this sharp-tongued and ungrateful heir suffer. His wide sleeves were like a steel wall as he waved them out. Xian Yuan Tong's eyes turned serious. Although he was unhappy with Zhong Shou, he felt that Luo Yan was too much. Just as he was about to speak up to stop him, his eyes suddenly froze, unable to move. In Zhong Shou's hand, a sword light suddenly flashed. Like it was just a casual slash, and Luo Xian's sleeves were sliced off. Then, the sword light turned back, using the spine of the sword to viciously slap Luo Xian's face. "Scram! I am going to beat someone up, don't block my path." He kept a bit of rationality, and didn't chop off Luo Xian's head on the spot. He continued to walk towards the opposite side. Luo Xian stumbled back several steps before he was able to stabilize his body. A mouthful of blood mixed with a few broken teeth was spat out. After a moment of bewilderment, his eyes turned red. He hollered like a wild beast that had lost its mind. Then, he directly grabbed the ancient sun axe behind him and heavily chopped down at Zhong Shou. Taking a deep breath, he was as swift as a rabbit, as fast as lightning. The people around were still in shock and weren't able to defend. When they reacted, the axe glow was already above Zhong Shou's head. Its strength was heavy, and it was also extremely swift. There was pretty much no chance of stopping. Even Chu Shui and Hu Zhongyuan felt a chill in their hearts, feeling that things weren't good. However, Zhong Shou's footsteps took a wrong step, pretty much brushing against the sharp blade as he narrowly avoided it. The lightning-toothed sword in his hand slashed out once more. I told you not to block my path, brainless thing, scram. The sword light changed, directly piercing through the axe shadow. Everyone's line of sight was blocked, and they didn't know what had happened. Then, they heard a heavy paw sound. The spine of the lightning tooth sword viciously slapped onto Luo Xian's face once more. This time, Zhong Shou was even more vicious, directly smashing his face. Luo Xian also retreated tens of steps. The 16 teeth on his right were pretty much all broken. He was pretty much stunned by Zhong Shou, standing stunned on the spot. Within the palace, the faces of Xianyuan Tong, Zhu Junho and the others were filled with disbelief, and they were similarly startled. Although they couldn't see it, they could feel it, which was why they knew that sword wasn't ordinary. It seemed really simple, but in that instance it went through numerous changes, making one unable to grasp where it went. They also knew that although Luo Xian's internal energy was suppressed, his physical strength was still there. However, the strength of his physical body was still there. His martial path was also extremely high, and he had immersed himself in the strength of the martial path for a long time. Even in Taigang Hall, normal Xiantian masters, even if there were 10 or 100 of them, wouldn't be his match. Was that sword just now just a coincidence? No, if it was a normal person, just the aura of a Xuanwu ancestor would be unable to take it. How would he be able to wave his sword? However, didn't the surrounding Gantian mountain prince not know martial arts? Luo Xian slowly came back to his senses. A fierce glow appeared in his eyes once more, his expression extremely vicious. Very good, today I'll kill you. His body lowered, like a leopard as he leaped 100 feet. The axe light flashed once more, directly slicing at Zhong Shou's chest. Xianyuan Tong unknowingly straightened his body, acting like he was ready to save him. Then, in Zhong Shou's hand, the sword light flashed once more, directly clashing with the giant axe. Kung! Within Taigang Hall, there was a sharp ring. In Xianyuan Tong's imagination, the scene of Zhong Shou's sword being smashed away by the axe didn't appear. Only to see the sword pressing down on the giant axe. Zhong Shou's body also used the momentum to jump up. He nimbly dodged it. Then, the sword light in midair slashed once more, this time heavily smashing onto Luo Xian's head. Tens of thousands of kilograms of strength instantly exploded out. Even with Luo Xian's Xuanwu body, when his true qi was being suppressed, he couldn't take it. He directly fell forwards onto the ground. Why is it endless? Zhong Shou curled his lips impatiently, just as he was about to walk past this person. His heart suddenly moved. In his blurry mind, he remembered that the words this person scolded him were really ugly. He instantly laughed coldly, suddenly stopping in his tracks. He was a scheming and evil person who liked to hold grudges. It was okay if he didn't remember before, but now that he remembered, how could he let it go so easily? Since the flame in his chest had already been ignited, it wouldn't be extinguished so easily. Just as Luo Xian used all his strength to stand up from the ground, another sword viciously slashed out. With a heavy pring, it once again smashed onto Luo Xian's head. This person was once again smashed back into the ground. Just now you said I was trash? Why do you keep saying that word? Don't you find it annoying? Forget it, one more scum is a little fresh, I won't talk about you. Didn't you say that your Xian mountain city went back on their words, so what can I do to you? I will beat you up now, what are you going to do? When Luo Xian once again supported his four limbs and tried to stand up, Zhong Shou kicked out, directly kicking him tens of feet away. Luo Xian was already dizzy from the hit. He could only bite his lips, saying coldly, I will kill you, I must kill you? Kill me? With your little ability, who can you kill? Zhong Shou scoffed coldly, forgetting about Xianyuan Tong as he walked in front of Luo Xian. When he stood up, he waved his axe once more. The sword in his hand drew an arc shadow. This sword whipped onto the back of Luo Xian's hand. With a kacha, it directly knocked the ancient sun axe out of his hand. you used the 8 desolate axe? Such a top axe technique was used by you like that, what an insult to this technique. With such little ability, what are you acting arrogant for? Do you really think you are amazing? My uncle who, even at the same realm, is 10 times stronger than you, but I didn't see him like you. Hu Zhongyuan instantly smiled when he heard Zhong Shou praise his father. As a son, naturally he was happy. Especially since it came from the prince, it was really precious. At this moment, practically everyone in the palace hall was stupefied. Luo Xian, with the body of a Xuanwu ancestor, was lying on the ground, being whipped by Zhong Shou with the back of his sword. In everyone's eyes, Zhong Shou, who Luo Xian was looking down on like an ant, was standing tall, coldly looking down on Luo Xian. He waved his sword. His body was giving off an "I'm really annoyed" aura. What was even more unacceptable was that until now, the few of them couldn't see through his strength. Just using the sword technique changes, he was able to suppress Luo Xian. Zhong Yuan looked on with pity, feeling fortunate that he wasn't beaten up so badly by Zhong Shou that day. That would have been a huge loss of face. He was also worried with the prince's personality. If he was angered, he would really hang him at the city gate for 3 days. It seemed like he had to be more careful in the future. Since you said that in this world, the strong are respected, then, who is stronger and who is weaker between you and me? Pretty much every time he said a word, Zhong Shou would whip Luo Xian's body with a sword. At this moment, the people around finally reacted. Zhu Junho was the first to frown, his body pouncing out. "Prince, please stop." When he said that, he was already close to the front. In his hands, a short halberd appeared as he swept over. There was no killing intent, but it caused a sharp blade light to force away Zhong Shou. Tan Tao followed closely behind, his 2 mandarin duck knives swiftly slashing over. A cold glow flashed in Samuraim's eyes as he suddenly turned around. His entire body along with the sword in his hand suddenly became illusionary, not real and not real. At this moment, Xianyuan Tong's eyes couldn't help but protrude, the wine cup in his hand was crushed into pieces. Is this sword intent? When the sword in Zhong Shou's hand stabbed out in front of everyone's eyes, it was obviously a martial path intent that made one's mind confused. Chapter 185. At this moment, outside of the Taigang Hall, Xianyuan Iren was standing at the bottom of the stone steps, looking on anxiously. Her pair of small hands clenched tightly, and then suddenly loosened. She wanted to peek, but this stone hall was really tightly sealed. A few windows were opened high up. She could only helplessly wait outside, wishing that she had a day-wandering realm spell to be able to disregard this wall. Who knows how Zhong Shou and father's discussion is going? Thinking back to when she came out, Xianyuan Tong's cold and solemn expression, Xianyuan Iren's brows furrowed, filled with worry. However, she calmed down. Zhong Shou's eloquence wasn't weak, and he was always polite when he spoke. He would definitely be able to have a good discussion with father. As long as he showed a little of his ability, it would solve father's worries. There wasn't much to worry about. If he knew about his sword techniques, father would be like Hu Qianqiu. That surprise. Who knows, he might drag Zhong Shou down and have a good drink. Thinking about that, Xianyuan Iren's eyes were filled with anticipation, her lips curling up as she smiled brightly. Looking at the surrounding martial cultivators, they were all startled. Although they didn't know why this little princess of Xian Mountain City was so happy. However, this smile was really nice to look at, pleasing to the eye. However, when they thought about how such a flower might be stuck on the body of the person in the hall, they felt even more worried. Within the stone hall, there wasn't the peaceful atmosphere that Xianyuan Iren had imagined. Blade shadows were everywhere. Zhong Shou's body instantly appeared. In the eyes of everyone, it was like numerous Zhong Shou had appeared, but also like from start to finish, he was stunned on the spot. Closely after, there was a sharp "king" sound. when the sky full of sword light retracted, only to see Zhu Juanho's halberd and Tan Tao's mandarin duck knife mysteriously clashing together. In the eyes of the two of them, they didn't even have time to show shock before they were forced back several steps by the huge force. The sword light in Zhong Shou's hand once again scattered over. Like stars, it covered Zhu Junho, scoffing lightly, "Let go!" Zhu Juanho's eyes instantly flashed sharply, rage rising. In the next instance, he was shocked, only to see the sword light in front of him turn into an eye-catching Milky Way, falling over. It dazzled one's eyes, making him feel that there was no weakness on his body. Where the sword light pointed at, it seemed like it was going to cover all of his vitals. At this moment, he finally understood Luo Xian's pain. He was like a fool, allowing Zhong Shou to beat him up. Such a sword was unblockable and unavoidable. Under the cover of this sky full of stars, he was completely at a loss. He had no idea how he should deal with it. How did this Gantian mountain prince have such exquisite and terrifying sword techniques? Where did he learn it from? In that instant, Zhu Junho bit the tip of his tongue. He knew that he had no other way to face such a sword technique. He could only disregard his life and fight it out with attack, using a life for a life, using an even stronger aura to counterattack. However, just as the true qi in his body was gathering up, he felt as if his wrist had been tapped lightly by something. Then, he couldn't hold onto the short halberd in his hand, spinning and flying into the distance. When the sky full of blade shadows retracted, Zhong Shou, who was hidden at the back, looked over once more. His brows furrowed before he calmed down. "Oh, you are not bad, at least you know your manners. I won't beat you up." The sword light flashed and knocked on the sides of his thighs, causing Zhu Junho to fall to the ground, unable to move at all. Only then did that halberd spin and land, stabbing right beside his head. One could even clearly feel the cold intent of the blade. Zhu Junho's face flushed red. At this moment, he didn't feel any joy or happiness. Apart from embarrassment, he also felt shock. What kind of monster was this teen? Those two swords should be sword intent that he had never seen before. Even if it wasn't, it was close to that level. However, it was personally displayed by the son of his benefactor, whom he didn't have high hopes for. All of a sudden, he didn't know whether he should be angry or happy. Sword intent, it's actually sword intent. At the depths of the hall, Xian Yuantong's hand had already started to tremble. The shards of the wine cup in his hand turned into sand and slid down from his palm. The first sword was the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword intent. Along with the illusionary ability of the Sky Fox race, even he couldn't see through it. Now it was the galaxy sword intent. After the sword was out, it was like the galaxy had appeared, extremely eye-catching. At this moment, his feelings were several times more complicated than before. Each sword that Zhong Shou whipped Luo Xian was like a heavy slap on his face. Apart from feeling embarrassed, he also felt pain for his capable subordinate being beaten up so badly by Zhong Shou. Vaguely, he felt a bit of regret. The last sentence that Zhong Shou said when he whipped Luo Xian directly stabbed into his heart. He knew that his words most probably hurt this kid's heart, which was why Zhong Shou was so furious. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. The son of his old friend had such ability. He should have been happy. However, why couldn't he be happy now? Lisina was totally frozen on the spot, sitting on the ground in a daze as she looked on with her eyes wide open. Speaking of which, in the first few days, Iran had mentioned it to her. Speaking of her fiancé, he would definitely be outstanding enough to surprise her. She also mentioned that the one who wasn't good enough was Iran herself. At that time, she couldn't believe it no matter what. At this moment, Zhong Shou's brain was still in a mess. However, he instinctively dealt with the halberd wielder beside him. The feeling that this Zhu Junho gave him was that he was really dangerous. Compared to Luo Xian and Tan Tao, He was several times more dangerous. Just now, he caught him off guard. If they really fought, he might not be able to win. Anyways, he would just take him down first. When he turned around, he saw Tan Tao once again pouncing over like a tiger with the mandarin duck blade in his hand. His expression was unprecedentedly solemn and serious. When the knife light rose up, it was really tight, not leaving any gap. Like a storm, he went all out as he crazily slashed down. Samuraim's eyes squinted. Then, he smiled out of habit. He stepped forwards, not retreating but advancing instead. Like when he was practicing his sword in the whirlpool at the bottom of the Black Pond, he was really calm and swift. He easily passed through the sky full of blade shadows, dodging left and right. After tens of steps, he was about to be forced out by the mandarin duck knives. The sword in his hand that everyone had forgotten about shone once more. Without hesitation, he stabbed out with his sword. Like a barracuda at the bottom of the ocean, like a sharp arrow, it swam through the knife light and headed right for Tan Tao's throat. This sword was created by him in the water, which was why it was called counter-current. Stabbing out thousands of times underwater to smash the undercurrents, hence the name counter-current. Although it wasn't as weird as the Styx River Death Sword, it wasn't as exquisite as the cloud-shocking god-destroying sword. However, this sword strike was definitely one of the strongest sword strikes in his entire life. When the sword slashed out, there was no way to counter it. In the last life and now, there was no exception. Tan Tao instantly felt a chill down his spine. The knife light danced, but it was of no use. The sword light stabbed over at the gaps between his mandarin duck knives. It was like it was really familiar with his knife path. When it changed, it caused all his efforts to block to miss. He could only explosively retreat. Crazily retreat. However, that sword light was like maggots in his bones, following closely and swiftly close to his throat. Just as Tan Tao was in despair, Xian Yuantong couldn't help but stand up and was about to interfere to save him. That sword light suddenly turned back and lightly tapped on Tan Tao's wrist. The two mandarin duck knives also flew up. They rolled into midair and then fell back down, nailing onto the ground. However, Tan Tao's aura became chaotic at that moment and he was fixed on the spot. The sword light in front of him slashed through the air once more. I hate such a scheming person like you. You deserve to be hit. He slashed Tan Tao's face with his sword, leaving a bloody scar. Zhong Shou thought back to what happened before and scoffed. Your mouth is really amazing, you talk too much. That sword light turned and turned back, another sword spine hitting the left side of this person's face. Tan Tao had just managed to catch his breath when he was heavily struck once more. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, feeling extremely indignant. He thought that he was smart and his martial path was strong. Within Xian Mountain City, he held huge power and was only below 2 to 3 people. When other people saw him, they were all respectful. Even those with higher statuses and stronger martial arts would be courteous to him. In his life, when had he suffered such humiliation? What he was most worried about was whether or not he would be like Luo Xian, beaten up by this teen. If that happened, he wouldn't have any face to meet anyone. Luckily, Zhong Shou thought about it for a moment. Although this person was a little evil, his face was still okay. His words were flawless and he couldn't find anything to use against him. If he beat him up like that, he wouldn't be able to hold his ground. In the past, when he rose up, he didn't like to talk reason when he did things. Only when he returned to the library and slowly cultivated his heart did he calm down. So in this life, he had to use virtue to win people over. Scoffing, Zhong Shou unwillingly let him go. He directly tapped on this person's neck, temporarily restricting his chakra meridians. Then, he unceremoniously kicked him away. The sword light flipped and heavily smacked on the head of Luo Xian, who was trying his best to climb up. You still want to climb up? Are you still not willing to admit defeat? Luo Xian's head was covered in blood. When his chin hit the ground, another crack sound was heard. On the floor made of Taigang stone, cracks appeared. His eyes were filled with shock. At this moment, he didn't have any strength left. He wasn't angry at all, only a fear that stabbed into his heart and also a deep sense of helplessness. Zhong Shou's eyes finally looked towards Xianyuan Tong. Chapter 186. Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Yuan were watching intently before this, enjoying themselves to the fullest. At this moment, they were panicking, thinking to themselves that this prince was planning to viciously beat up everyone in the stone hall. The former had been following closely behind Zhong Shou, afraid that Zhong Shou would be injured. However, at this moment, he felt that something wasn't right. Looking from the side, only to see that Zhong Shou's face was flushed red, his eyes were unfocused, like he was drunk. Before this, he thought that Zhong Shou had purposely beaten up the few of them. At this moment, he couldn't help but grumble. Before this, forget about the three of them, if he beat them up then so be it. Their Gantian mountain didn't care. However, this Xianyuan Tong was not only the city lord of Xian Mountain City, but he was also his prince's future father-in-law. If he was really beaten up by the prince, what would happen? Following which, he shook his head, thinking that something wasn't right. Xianyuan Tong was a peak earth chakra expert, several times stronger than his father. Even if he didn't use true qi, just his physical body, he was much stronger than Zhu Junho and the others. There was no reason for him to lose. What he had to be careful of was his prince, to not be beaten up instead. He was fully focused, following closely behind. At the crucial moment, he was prepared to block a knife for Zhong Shou. Xianyuan Tong's gaze was as calm as water. Until Zhong Shou walked over once more did he shake his head and sigh, standing up from his seat. When he sat down, he was really gentle and elegant. However, when he stood up, he was like a majestic giant mountain, stabbing into the clouds. That strong and vast aura filled up the hall. It caused Hu Zhongyuan and the others to feel that this wide stone hall suddenly became extremely narrow. Just the body of the person in front of them couldn't fit all of them. However, he wasn't holding a weapon, his hands empty, his expression was really complicated. I thought that the prince couldn't cultivate. Who knew that even the marquis wasn't your opponent? Your father's fist techniques were unrivaled in the entire Donglin Cloud continent, but your sword is even better than your father's. At the age of 14, his sword Dao was already connected to the spirit, and he was able to comprehend sword intent. The son of an old friend actually had such accomplishment. Xianyuan Tong's heart was filled with joy and comfort. It's just that you humiliated my subordinates. I feel so angry that I can't wait to beat you up as well. Zhong Shou frowned. Who was this person? He couldn't remember. It was just a fight. Why was there so much nonsense? Following which Xianyuan Tong's outer robe was ripped apart, turning into pieces of cloth and exploding. He clenched his fists and said, "Since you said you want to beat me up, then come at me. Let me see how powerful my old friend's son's swordsmanship is. My entire cultivation base is in this mace. However, with your father's guidance, this fist technique isn't considered weak. I will fight you empty-handed. If you lose, don't blame me for bullying you. Naturally, if you can truly beat me up, I will feel happy." When the knuckles on his wrist gave out a popping sound like beans being fried. Xianyuan Tong's body was becoming more and more majestic. Hu Zhongyuan stood close to him, only to feel that he couldn't breathe. He was unable to take another step forward. Only then did he know how amusing it was for him to block a knife for Zhong Shou. There was no way for him to interfere in the battle between the two of them. Maybe his strength was only 3 meridians away from Xianyuan Tong, or even a large portion better than Zhong Shou. However, these two experts were enough to look down on him in terms of the martial path. Zhong Shou's eyes lit up, hot blood burning in his body. Under the suppression of Xianyuan Tong's aura, his fighting spirit crazily jumped, pretty much occupying his entire consciousness. Fight, 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 beat him up. This person was so strong, so amazing. Standing in front of him was a huge mountain, like no matter what, it couldn't be shaken. However, the more it was like that, the more excited he was. He wanted to knock down the mountain, he wanted to flatten the peak. Today he wanted to fight to his heart's content. The sword in his hand craved to show off its sharpness. Grinning, Zhong Shou held the lightning-toothed sword, stepping forwards without hesitation. It was still the footwork that he trained in deep water. The sword was known as going against the current, the footwork was known as going against the current, going against the momentum to strike. Under such an intense and unparalleled aura suppression, it was obvious that he was at ease, elegant and casual, like he was taking a stroll in the courtyard. He walked towards Xianyuan Tong. Each step was the weakest part of Xianyuan Tong's martial path aura and was also the easiest to penetrate. Zhong Shou's aura also started to climb along with these steps. At the start, he was being suppressed, but when he was 50 feet away from Xianyuan Tong, it was blazing to the peak. He was actually on the same level as Xianyuan Tong, going up against him. Just as their gazes clashed, like they were about to explode. Suddenly, a clang sound was heard from the side. Zhong Shou couldn't help but frown. He was originally planning to use his sword, but this sound broke his rhythm. He couldn't help but look unhappily to the side. Who was it to disturb his mood? This person really didn't know how to read the situation. Where he looked, he saw that it was Fang Shu. He was gritting his teeth as he sat at the table below Li Sina. Apart from his face filled with disbelief, his body was trembling, unable to suppress it. The position he sat at was less than 50 feet away from the two of them. Under Xianyuan Tong's aura suppression, he couldn't take it anymore. At this moment, the wine cup in his hand couldn't help but fall from his hand. Zhong Shou was at a loss, thinking back to who this person was. After a short while, he still didn't get anything. He only knew that this fellow made him really annoyed. A cold glow flashed in his eyes, waving his left sleeves. Instantly 4 cold glows flew out. Xianyuan Tong was originally annoyed, but when he saw the situation, he was slightly shocked. He hurriedly stepped forwards, grabbing with his right fist, an energy sucking towards the cold glows. Within this Taigang Hall, he was actually able to send energy outwards. However, just as that suction force touched, the 4 cloud pattern flying knives were like fish in water, slightly shaking and deviating from their original position. Their speed increased by several times as they continued to shoot out. Flying knife changing direction. Xianyuan Tong couldn't help but feel astonished. This wasn't a spirit master's sword driving technique, but a martial cultivator's throwing technique. Not only was it filled with strong true qi, but it was also able to change direction in the air. His nephew definitely couldn't reach the ascended realm, so how did he do it? Fang Shu, on the other hand, was even more shocked. He let out a cry and sat up from his seat. He raised his hand and a sword appeared, turning into numerous layers of thick sword veils covering his body. However, those 4 cloud pattern flying knives weren't obstructed at all, piercing through the sword veils. They directly pierced into his body. After that, his entire body was dragged back by that huge force and was nailed onto a stone pillar. 2 of them were pierced into his shoulders, while the other 2 were pierced into his calf. Luckily, the energy on the flying knives didn't explode just like that. It only locked up all the meridians in his body such that he couldn't move, following which threads of energy swam in. It caused his entire body to feel pain like he was being sliced into pieces. Looking at the 2 wounds on his shoulder, Fang Shu couldn't help but feel lost. He didn't know how Han Nishui was in the mysterious Cloud Spirit sect, but he knew that even his senior brother was similar to him at this age. However, at this moment, he was being easily suppressed. If Zhong Shou was willing, he only needed one of the flying knives to take his life. In other words, this Gantian mountain prince, be it talent or strength, was several times better than the proud and arrogant core disciples of hidden sects. Even at this moment, he was in so much pain that he wished he could faint. Lysina, who was at the side, had a wooden expression as she stared fixedly at him. She had completely forgotten how to react. Since she found out that this Gantian mountain prince was a dual meridian body, she had been worried for Iran numerous times, unable to sleep. However, when Zhong Shou appeared in front of her eyes, he used such an unparalleled strength to suppress all the talents in the world that she knew of. All of a sudden, like Xian Yuantong, she didn't know whether she should be happy or sad. With such little strength, I can kill you like an ant. Why are you acting cool in front of people? I hate disciples of famous sects like you the most. Scoffing, Zhong Shou only felt great in his heart. However, looking forward, he saw Xian Yuantong's expression changing as he muttered. Flying knife changing direction, cloud shocking god destroying, what flying knife technique is this? At this moment, Xian Yuantong was distracted. If he used his sword, he would be able to catch him off guard. However, Zhong Shou suppressed his desire. Since it wasn't a true battle to the death, then naturally he couldn't have an unfair advantage. Even if he wanted to beat him up, he had to beat him up until he was convinced. Burping, Zhong Shou thought about it carefully before reaching out his hand and waving it in front of Xian Yuantong. But, old man acting young, come back to your senses. Where are you looking? If you don't pay attention, I'm going to attack. Xian Yuantong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Zhong Shou was really muddle-headed. Since he was a martial artist, how could he get drunk so easily? Looking at the situation, it didn't seem fake. However, he retracted his thoughts, instantly tossing aside all the random thoughts. Just as he was fully focused, Zhong Shou's shoulder suddenly moved. Watch my sword. A clear sword image suddenly pierced through the air. It suddenly pierced out from the most unbelievable part, directly striking at Xian Yuantong's throat. Xian Yuantong's eyes opened wide, not punching out. His feet stepped down, instantly numerous spiderweb-like cracks spread out. Broken stone flew everywhere, bringing with it a strong force as it shot out all around. There was also a wall-like wind that spread out in front of him. That clear sword light was forcefully shifted by this crazy wind. Xian Yuantong's body also charged forwards, directly punching out at Zhong Shou's forehead. One fist out, its strength was like that of toppling mountains and overturning the seas. Zhong Shou's expression changed, his feet stepping on the water step. Under this fist wind, he was forced back tens of feet before he was able to stabilize himself. Once again, he thrust his sword back. It was still incomparably graceful as it moved through the astral winds with ease. Xian Yuantong still didn't block, using his right leg as an axis as he swept out. Like a knife, slanting upwards. Before that sword attack even touched, that extremely firm lightning tooth sword showed signs of twisting under the pressure of the wind. Chapter 187. F*******, how fierce! This is just using strength to suppress people. How despicable! How can I beat him? Hu Zhongyuan's body retreated another 100 feet before he was able to stabilize himself, only to see Zhong Shou's body shoot out in time and fly backward. That sharp blade-like leg wind continued to sweep upwards, striking the roof and directly breaking a deep hole. Along with a loud explosion, large pieces of stone fell down. It caused the entire Taigang Hall to shake. Following which, no matter how Zhong Shou's sword changed, no matter how unpredictable it was, Xian Yuantong didn't bother and didn't block it. Even if his body was full of weaknesses, he didn't care, directly smashing out with a fist and a leg, domineering and fierce. Hu Zhongyuan was filled with respect. He had no choice but to retreat another 100 feet. Chu Shui and Zhong Yuan couldn't take it anymore and were forced to the corner of the stone hall. To think that Zhong Shou, at the initial Xiantian realm, could actually survive in front of Xian Yuantong. Pretty much every fist that this Xian Mountain City Lord punched out would cause the wind to surge. Each leg that swept out would cause the stone hall to shake. He was like a human-shaped giant mountain, causing the ground to shake. Just a few strikes and he forced Zhong Shou's body back hundreds of feet. It was like a giant boulder rolling down from the top of a cliff. It was incomparably dangerous, crushing everything with a crushing force. Zhong Shou seemed to be really furious, fearless and not giving up. He didn't show any signs of giving up, continuing to pass through the fist wind. Occasionally he would stab out, but it was exquisite to the extreme. When he retreated to the center of the hall, he turned into specks of starlight, like an eye-catching Milky Way as he struck back. Thousands of sword shadows continuously sliced the vast splitting astral wind in front of him as they crazily charged forward. Pretty much in an instant, he was in front of Xian Yuan Tong. It was as if it wanted to completely drown his figure. In Xian Yuan Tong's eyes, a cold glow flashed. He didn't retreat and instead charged forward. Not only was he quick as lightning and as intense as fire, his aura was several times stronger. Good sword art. However, this strength was too weak. Even if you come from 1,000 ways, I will go on my own. Break. A punch the size of a bowl smashed into the center of the Milky Way sword waterfall, colliding with the sharpest edge of the sword light. Clang! When the fist and sword collided, Zhong Shou's figure seemed to have been hit by a 1,000,000-pound hammer swinging at high speed. His entire body was like a broken sack as he flew backwards with a loud bang. It was only when he approached the door of the palace that he finally stabilized himself. However, when he landed on the ground, he slid back over 100 feet. After that, Zhong Shou coughed up blood and knelt on the ground weakly. He relied on the sword in his hand to support his body, which was why he didn't fall to the ground. Hu Zhongyuan calmed down. Although he had expected that Zhong Shou wouldn't be able to win against Xian Yuan Tong, at this moment he felt that it was unfair for Zhong Shou. This was a suppression. An elephant going all out to step on an ant. Too heartless, this Xian Mountain City Lord really didn't have any style. At that time his father sealed 97% of his strength to fight with Zhong Shou. As for this person, apart from the suppression of true qi by this Taigang Hall, he pretty much used all his strength. The difference between the two was close to 20 times. That Xian Yuan Tong seemed to know that he was a little like the strong bullying the weak. After stopping, he explained apologetically, "Your sword path is so high that it far exceeds what I expected. If I held back a bit of strength, I might lose to you. So in this battle, I have to go all out and use my sharpness. Today's loss isn't because your martial path isn't good, but because your strength is too weak. You don't have to worry about it. If you still have strength, then get up and apologize to your Uncle Tan and Uncle Luo. They are your seniors and won't blame you." His words weren't ambiguous at all, treating Zhong Shou as his son-in-law. Xian Yuan Tong's eyes were filled with surprise. 10 years of time, he didn't expect that the son of his old friend would be so strong to such an extent. However, halfway through his words, Xian Yuan Tong paused, looking forward in shock, only to see that Zhong Shou had shakily stood up. His eyes didn't show any signs of admitting defeat, only a blazing flame crazily burning. He couldn't help but be startled, silently standing there with his hands by his side, waiting quietly. At this moment, Zhong Shou's mind was still a little blurry, not having much consciousness. However, on the other hand, he was extremely clear, numerous sword techniques flashing across his mind. The areas that he thought he didn't understand were now totally clear. He had already comprehended the essence, even more so, merging everything together and seeking perfection. His sword only looked up to the strong, becoming stronger when he met the strong, becoming stronger when he met the strong. Apologize, what a joke! When Zhong Shou beat people up, he never said the word, apologize. Slowly, there was actually a slight wind blowing from the ground, gathering around Zhong Shou's body. That thick fog-like fire and water spiritual energy caused that 10 feet of space to show a red and white color. It was like a giant spiral spinning endlessly. This spiritual energy, is it a spiritual technique? Xianyuan Tong wasn't sure. At first he thought that Zhong Shou's energy was seeping out, causing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to react. Following which he remembered that this place was within the Taigang Hall. Apart from himself, who was half a step into the ascended realm, other Xiantians couldn't seep out their energy. However, this Zhong Shou could still summon the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. That's right, it is actually soul power. Using his own soul power to summon the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Apart from Xiantian Master, this kid is also a spirit master, dual cultivator. His heart was shocked. Xianyuan Tong's eyes lost focus. Coincidentally, at that moment, Zhong Shou suddenly opened his eyes. His cold gaze seemed like it could pierce through everything. His entire body suddenly floated. It was as if it had blended into the gentle breeze and flew over. From 500 feet away, a sword stabbed over. It was still elegant and exquisite, so perfect that it was close to being flawless, using up the essence of the sword path. Xianyuan Tong's mind was slightly distracted before he recovered. Looking at the incoming sword light, his eyes lit up again, and he exclaimed in admiration, "What a good sword! It was truly marvelous." His swordsmanship had actually improved again on the top of the tall building. Who knows if it was because you didn't go all out or because you comprehended something. What a terrifying talent! Without hesitation, he still punched out with a fist. All of his muscles were pulled, the vital energy in his body was crazily burning. The aura of this fist was 30% stronger. So what if your technique is close to the path? Without a foundation to rely on, you are still weak. How weak? Break for me. Where the fist wind came from was where the sword blade came from. When he attacked, Xianyuan Tong's eyes turned ice cold, close to that of a machine. All the warmth in his eyes disappeared, only a coldness that could destroy everything, a confidence that could crush everything. Only when he looked at Zhong Shou's sword and saw that he didn't have any intention to dodge did he feel slightly shocked. However, in just a moment, he calmed down. It was better if he didn't dodge, this fist could decide victory and defeat. Dang! When the fist and sword struck once more, the entire stone hall shook once more. Zhong Shou's body was like what everyone expected, tossed backward. However, he didn't look like he was in a bad state. Instead, like a leaf, he retreated to the side of the stone door before floating down. On the contrary, it was Xianyuan Tong who took 3 steps back. Each step caused the Taigang rock below to be smashed into pieces. Within the 1,000 feet of space, the temperature was fluctuating between cold and hot. And at the place where the two of them had fought, there were faint traces of lightning flickering. How is that possible? This sword is so strong. Just an initial Xiantian meridian body. Where did this kid get the strength to go up against me? This kid's spiritual cultivation has actually reached the night-wandering realm. What terrifying talent! However, even so, he shouldn't have such strength. We are pretty much on the same level. Huge waves rose up in Xianyuan Tong's chest. On the side, Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Yuan's mouths were agape. That was 9 meridians of the earth chakra level, peak of Xuanwu. Even within the Taigang Hall, he casually had hundreds of thousands of kilograms of strength. Could it be that their crown prince had taken some kind of Herculean pill? He was actually able to force Xianyuan Tong back 3 steps with one sword. Barely able to fight on the same level in the situation? Or at this moment, was he possessed by some god or demon? Zhu Junho and Tan Tao, who were on the ground, were filled with disbelief. This sword strike completely disregarded the difference in cultivation level. Unless this Zhong Shou was an expert above the ancestor realm, if not, it was impossible. Luo Xian tried his best to raise his head. his eyes wide open. Before this, he was furious and unconvinced, wanting to kill this Zhong Shou. However, at this moment, he could only feel the shock in his chest, each wave stronger than the last. Although he didn't understand much, but the feeling that this kid's sword gave him was really strong. Lysena's eyes were filled with confusion, like she was thinking back to something. A moment later, she said in a startled manner, "Spirit and martial arts merging, it is actually spirit and martial arts merging. Before my master died, he spent all his effort but was still unable to achieve spirit and martial arts merging." Her muttering was so soft that one couldn't hear it. However, it was like a bomb, causing the hearts of the two people in the stone hall to shake. That Feng Shu was also slightly stunned, following which he muttered, "How can it be spirit and martial arts merging? That's right, using initial earth chakra to go up against 9 meridians. If it isn't spirit and martial arts merging, what is it?" Xianyuan Tong took in a deep cold breath. Although his wife's martial path wasn't strong, she came from a demon sect. Her foresight and knowledge were even better than his. Instantly, his eyes were like torches as he focused on the area around Zhong Shou's body. Then, he saw the water and fire spiritual energy gathering around Zhong Shou's body like clouds and mist, injecting towards the tip of the sword. Xianyuan Tong's pupils instantly constricted into a needle shape. It wasn't a normal dual cultivator, using true qi and spells to help. Instead, the two were compatible, energy and soul merging into one, intersecting with one another without any disharmony. It was like the two of them were born to merge together, one body. They didn't reject one another and consume one another. No wonder that sword was strong enough to go up against him. Using initial Xiantian true qi along with heaven and earth spiritual energy, the strength of that sword was able to make up for the difference. It reduced the strength of the two of them limitlessly, following which his eyes were filled with shock. Thinking about how many dual cultivators were there in the world? How many could achieve spirit and martial arts merging into one? Who could do it at the Xiantian realm at 14 years old? Chapter 188. The silent stone hall was suddenly broken by a burst of laughter. Everyone looked over, only to see Zhong Shou holding a sword as he walked over step by step. Each step was much faster than the previous one, slowly turning into a swift walk. On his face, he was laughing with an unknown meaning. His pupils were spread out with no focus, like he had lost consciousness. However, at this moment, everyone only felt an incomparably fearful feeling in their hearts. They felt that the current Zhong Shou was in extreme danger. Xianyuan Tong's expression turned cold. He silently took out an iron mace hanging by his waist. He knew that he couldn't block such a sword with his bare hands. In the next instance, only Zhong Shou's body accelerated to the extreme. If before, his body was like a light breeze, then at this moment, it was like a crazy wind pouncing over. The sword light shone, directly hanging upside down. It struck on the iron mace, giving out a crisp ding sound. Instantly energy surged, lightning glow spread out. Xianyuan Tong frowned, taking a step back. All the strength he could take was released beneath his feet. On the Taigeng stone, a deep hole was left. However, Zhong Shou's sword only retreated slightly before it pierced through and struck right at his face. Xianyuan Tong's heart didn't move, calmly placing the mace in front of his eyes. Following which, an extremely sharp and huge force charged over. He couldn't help but retreat. The stone slabs on the ground were scattered about. The wind surged, sword energy scattered all about, causing numerous pieces of stone to fall from the roof. And these two attacks were only the beginning. The sword and mace clashing sounds were soft at the start, like that of iron being forged, with a rhythm. However, a moment later, it turned into a crazy storm. That crisp and sharp sound was continuous, like rain hitting a banana. Before the first sound landed, the second one had already sounded out. At this moment, Zhong Shou seemed to have transformed into a human-shaped storm, crazily waving his sword, crazily stabbing out. Like there was no order at all, but each sword forced Xian Yuantong to defend and not attack. Almost every sword caused Xian Yuantong to take a step back and break a stone slab. It was a complete reversal of the previous situation. At that time, Xian Yuantong was like a rolling boulder, pressuring Zhong Shou with a crushing force. At this moment, in front of the storm that Zhong Shou had turned into, Xian Yuantong was still like a mountain. However, under the ravages of this storm, they had no choice but to retreat and loosen up. Impossible! Impossible! Xian Yuantong's footsteps were steady as he retreated step by step. In these 10 breaths of time, he had blocked 90 sword strikes and retreated 90 steps. They had almost returned to where they were when the battle started. At this moment, Xian Yuantong's eyes were filled with shock and doubt. He did not care about winning or losing. The more powerful Zhong Shou's swordsmanship was, the happier he would be. However, he didn't understand that in these successive exchanges, Zhong Shou's sword had pretty much gone against the common sense of martial arts. Even if he was a dual cultivator, even if he was in spirit and martial arts merger, the power on Zhong Shou's sword was able to go up against him. However, after all, his main body was only at the initial meridian of the Earth Chakra level, an initial Xiantian master. At this moment, pretty much every strike of the two of them was going all out. Normally speaking, Zhong Shou would not be able to maintain such strength for a long period of time. The accumulated strength of each strike was enough to cause Zhong Shou's body to collapse. How was he able to maintain such a high-intensity sword energy? Why did he not show any signs of weakness? Instead, each sword was stronger than the last. Speaking of which, the strength that he used, every time he clashed with Zhong Shou's lightning-tooth sword, a little of it would be taken away. And this sword energy was terrifyingly concentrated, rotating at high speeds like a drill, looking really weird. Xian Yuantong's heart moved slightly as he observed carefully. He noticed that the moment his rebounding strength came into contact with Zhong Shou's sword, it was directly swept away by the high-speed spinning of the fire and water spiral energy. Along with the spiritual energy that seeped out, it spread out. A portion of it was directly sucked in by Zhong Shou. Who knows what method he used, but in the next moment it actually struck back. The strength that truly shook Zhong Shou's body was less than 10%. Which was why that lightning-tooth sword was continuously stabbing and piercing. No wonder. From start to finish, his sword was like a waterfall, surging and not stopping. No wonder his attacks were wave after wave stronger than the last. If this continued, wouldn't he get stronger and stronger, without stopping? His chest shook slightly, but he felt the energy meridians in his abdomen suddenly twisting. His heart couldn't help but sink to the bottom of the valley. This is too sick. He still hasn't stopped. What medicine did our prince eat? Similarly, hiding in the corner to block the wind for his niece, Hu Zhongyuan only felt his heart go numb. Before this, he felt that Xian Yuantong was using strength to suppress Zhong Shou, like he was bullying him. At this moment, he felt some pity for Xian Yuantong. That spirit and martial arts merger, was it really so strong? Strong to such an extent? Directly crossing 9 grades, suppressing Xian Yuantong so much that he didn't have any temper at all. One must know that even if Xian Yuantong was unable to use true qi, he was still really strong. The more one cultivated the energy cultivation to a high level, the more one would be clear about the gap between each grade. Not only pure strength, bones, vital energy, but also stamina, spiritual sense, all other areas would be strengthened. Apart from that, there was also comprehension of the martial path. Xiantian Master, Martial Ancestor, Xuanwu Ancestor. The gap of these 3 grades was immeasurable. Even if one added in Zhong Shou's Night Wandering Realm Spirit Master cultivation, it was still the same. which was why Hu Zhongyuan directly labeled Zhong Shou as a sick person. As for Chu Shui's ears, threads of blood flowed down. The clanging sounds that reverberated throughout the hall didn't have much of an effect on the martial ancestors below 4 meridians of the earth chakra level. However, to her, it was really unbearable, continuously striking at her eardrums. Luckily, there was Hu Zhongyuan protecting her, like a wall standing in front of her. Although the hall was hot and cold due to Zhong Shou's sword technique, she was still able to hold on. However, at this moment, Chu Shui was more worried about Zhong Shou, sighing, "Young master is probably going berserk again." Berserk? Hu Zhongyuan was startled. "What do you mean? Did the prince's current situation happen before?" "It means going berserk, that's what young master taught me." Chu Shui casually explained, "The last time was at Pill Spirit Mountain. It seemed like because Uncle Ian and I were insulted, young master was really angry. In the end, he cut down the 18 wooden puppets of Lingyun's sect and drew 12 god talismans." Shui felt really good. Wooden puppets? God talismans? Hu Zhongyuan was first filled with doubt, following which he sucked in a cold breath. It's the Sky Sword platform and God Talisman platform. He couldn't help but exchange glances with Zhong Yuan beside him, their faces filled with disbelief. The 18 God Talismans of the small heaven sword formation that was said to be unbreakable for 10,000 years were broken by someone just like that? Moreover, it was done by the prince? After following Zhong Shou for so long, he had never heard of such a matter. Why wasn't there any news from Lingyun's sect? However, with Zhong Shou's current situation, this prince might have a chance of breaking it. His heart pounding for a moment, Hu Zhongyuan heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that his heart realm cultivation was too weak. He decided that no matter what his prince did in the future, he would remain calm. Looking out for a moment, he heard Chu Shui say, "I think the prince is going to lose. 45 minutes have passed. It would be best if he doesn't get beaten up by this Xianyuan city lord." Hu Zhongyuan nodded his head in agreement. He had followed Zhong Shou for so many days and knew that Zhong Shou's stamina was really weak. Within 2 hours, he could be so strong that he could only feel fear. However, after 2 to 4 hours, he would have to lie down. However, Zhong Shou cultivated both spiritual and spiritual cultivation. Even at that time, he wasn't someone that others could take lightly. Using the soul to drive the sword was even stronger. However, at this moment, since he was merging spirit and martial arts, naturally he couldn't just rely on spiritual cultivation to fight. Xianyuan Tong's strength was stronger after all. His martial path was close to the ascended realm. As long as he could hold on for a period of time, Zhong Shou could only let himself be slaughtered. Once again holding up the Tiger King knife, Hu Zhongyuan was fully focused as he looked into the distance. Although he knew that even if he attacked, it would be useless, he still had to try. He couldn't just sit there and watch Xianyuan Tong injure Zhong Shou. Zhong Yuan laughed coldly at the side. "What are you nervous about? The prince has already won." Seeing that Hu Zhongyuan and Chu Shui were looking over in disdain, Zhong Shou was stunned. Zhong Yuan's brows furrowed in annoyance, following which he curled his lips in disdain. "Two idiots, go and look at their feet." Hu Zhongyuan's brows furrowed, following Zhong Yuan's line of sight and looking over. His eyes were filled with shock. Xianyuan Tong's previously incomparably heavy and orderly footsteps, at this moment, were actually gradually becoming chaotic. That mountain-like aura was shaking, loosening, and collapsing. The iron mace in his hand was in a mess, totally not as calm as before. For some reason, Zhong Yuan thought back to what Xianyuan Tong said about true qi going astray. Was the weakness of the cultivation method acting up? The sound of the sword mace striking continued to ring out in the hall. However, it was slowly becoming chaotic, the rhythm totally changing. In just 10 swords, Xianyuan Tong was forced into the back wall of the stone hall. Zhong Shou's clear voice rang out once more. "Let go!" A blood light scattered, the tip of the lightning-toothed sword suddenly stabbed into Xian Yuan Tong's left hand. Using a bit of strength, that iron mace was tossed aside. Xian Yuan Tong couldn't help but lean against the wall with an ashen white face. Zhong Shou's sword was once again raised up in the air, like it was about to slash down swiftly. Large amounts of cold sweat appeared on Hu Zhongyuan's head. His prince had beaten up a Tan Tao, a Luo Xian and a Zhu Junho, and it wasn't enough. Could it be that he was going to beat up his father-in-law today? Father, what was going to happen? Just as he was swiftly dashing forwards, he was filled with worry. However, the heaven and earth spiritual energy that gathered around Zhong Shou's body was dissipating. As for that skinny figure, it was as if he had suddenly lost his spirit. His entire body fell forward and fell into Xian Yuan Tong's embrace. Chapter 189. Hu Zhongyuan was startled, his body stopping on the spot, his heart relaxing. In the next moment, he heard the stone hall heave a sigh of relief. Although the outcome in front of their eyes was out of their expectations, it was the best way to end it. Following which their eyes were filled with confusion, only feeling that their minds were in a daze. The Gantian mountain prince in front of them went all out against Xian Yuan Tong, who was a 9-meridian Xuanwu master, and forcefully defeated him. Did that really happen just now? Xian Yuan Tong's eyes were filled with shock as he supported Zhong Shou. His expression was really complicated, both happy and filled with unwillingness. Naturally, there was also a little bit of anger from embarrassment. After a short while, he remembered that he wanted to check on Zhong Shou's current situation. He hurriedly used his hands to check his meridians, injecting internal energy into Zhong Shou's body. It actually turned into spiral meridians? So that was the case. Using spiral energy to avoid the restrictions of the dual meridian body, what an amazing idea! And also so much Xiantian true energy, where did this kid get it from? No wonder there was no aura leaking out from his body, so it was because of this sealing spiritual formation. No wonder he could cultivate and reach such a realm in such a short time. The strength of his physical body was actually comparable to the peak of Xiantian. Who knows how he trained, pretty much without any weaknesses. The true qi his body could contain was several times that of normal initial Xiantian masters. He actually broke through the barriers from heaven. The waves that he forcefully suppressed before once again surged out. Xian Yuan Tong sat quietly, waiting for his emotions to calm down. Even if he had already confirmed that Zhong Shou had stepped into the Xiantian realm. However, at this moment, his heart was still filled with shock. He originally thought that this kid had no fate with the martial arts in his life. But when Zhong Shou appeared in front of him once more, he gave him such a surprise. Dual meridian body, barriers from heaven, no matter which one it was, if it was on a normal person, they wouldn't be able to solve it. However, Zhong Shou had forcefully opened up a path. He actually merged 2 spiritual veins into his dual meridians. This child was really daring. He was simply indulging in the wildest fantasy. But from the looks of it, he really is drunk. He snorted to show his dissatisfaction. Suddenly, the large iron door in front of the palace suddenly gave out a creaking sound. Xian Yuan Iren walked in through the crack in the door, and then she was startled on the spot. What was going on? Tan Tao, Luo Xian, and even Uncle Zhu were all lying on the ground, unable to move. As for Uncle Luo Yan's head, it was as big as a steamed bun. His face was covered in blood and bruises. Zhong Shou had also fainted in his father's arms, and there was a scar on his father's wrist. As for his mother, she was in a daze, as if she had been completely stunned. She sat there without moving, and her expression was constantly changing. As for senior brother Feng Shu, he was pinned to a stone pillar by 4 cloud-pattern flying daggers. Xian Yuan Iren couldn't help but be speechless, standing on the spot not knowing what to do. She originally thought that Zhong Shou would have a good talk with her father. Why did it become such a situation in the end? Xian Yuan Tong smiled, carrying Zhong Shou and standing up. His expression was serious, and his gaze turned solemn. From today on, this kid is the young city lord of my Xian Mountain City. If anyone is unhappy, I'll take his life. Within the stone hall, it was totally silent, and no one objected. Even Li Sina kept silent and didn't say anything. Xian Yuan Tong slightly nodded his head, and then looked towards Fang Shu. Nephew Fang, my daughter and the Gantian Mountain Prince have a marriage agreement, and we only lack a date. Today's marriage has been decided. Your Pill Fountain sect shouldn't have any objections, right? Fang Shu smiled bitterly. He looked at the 4 flying daggers on his body, and then shook his head decisively. This is Mayor Xuanyuan's family matter. Although junior sister Iren has joined my sect, this matter is still decided by the mayor. 14 years old, initial Xiantian Meridian, Night Wandering Realm, sword path one with the spirit and martial arts merging into one. Such a person, even the Pill Fountain sect had to avoid him and rely heavily on him. Xian Yuan Tong nodded his head in satisfaction. When he looked at Zhong Shou, for some reason, he was furious. This kid had a good idea. Everything he had would be his in the future. The daughter he raised bitterly like a flower was going to be snatched away by this fellow. What a mess. He really wanted to smash him to the ground. Following which he took in a deep breath. Xian Yuan Tong's voice suddenly turned cold, filled with a cold intent. Also, if anyone leaks a single word about today's matter, even if you are brothers who have followed me for many years, I will be merciless. Don't blame me for not warning you. Along with this voice, a killing intent instantly covered the hall. He wasn't afraid of losing face and didn't feel that being defeated by Zhong Shou was something he couldn't accept. Only this kid's spirit and martial arts merging into one was something he didn't want people to know about. In his heart, he was only thinking about whether or not this kid had a chance to charge for the true spirit and martial path peak after hundreds and thousands of years. In just 10 years, this kid would be able to shock the 5 continents and rule the cloud world. However, today he was just a seedling and needed him to block the wind and rain for him. The moment such a thought rose up, Xian Yuan Tong's heart moved slightly. He felt that the internal qi that had not moved for a long time suddenly started to surge like it was going to topple mountains and flip oceans. Before this, due to his cultivation being too rushed, the obstructions that were caused were all broken open. Those hidden injuries were all being healed. His eyes instantly lit up. He knew that he just needed one step to break through that layer of obstacles. He would step into the Heaven Chakra realm and become the Ascended realm. Scoff, who isn't happy, I will whip you. Whoever dares to snatch my woman, I will chop them up. Kill, 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 kill until the heavens and earth are clear. All the soft girls are mine, no one is allowed to snatch them. Zhong Shou laid on the bed, his arms and legs dancing. Then, his 4 limbs suddenly stopped, that blurry consciousness suddenly came to. Then, in an instant, he had a very dangerous and bad feeling. His eyes sneakily opened a slit, only to see Xianyuan Iren sitting at the side of the bed with a green face. Her pair of beautiful eyes were looking down at him. Zhong Shoxin's heart skipped a beat and he was prepared to continue to pretend to sleep. However, the soft meat by his waist was instantly grabbed and twisted 360 degrees. Zhong Shou instantly sucked in a cold breath, opening his eyes and hissing, "You little girl, why are you so vicious? I am your fiancé." Xianyuan Iren's face was solemn. "Just now you were talking in your sleep. Who were you preparing to kill in your dreams?" Zhong Shou blinked, acting like he was in deep thought. A moment later, he shook his head. "I forgot, I remember that someone wanted to snatch my wife. Shouldn't he be killed?" Xianyuan Iren's eyes were filled with a smile, but her face turned into doubt. "You also said that all the soft girls are yours and no one can snatch them from you. Then what are soft girls?" Zhong Shou's heart sank once more, thinking to himself, how could he say out the wild desire in his heart? And it was heard by the person he shouldn't know about? Laughing out loud, Zhong Shou scratched his head, his face filled with confusion. Did I say that? Iran, you must have heard wrongly. The plan now was to not admit it even if he was beaten to death. Xianyuan Iran's eyes were dark and sunken, carefully looking at Zhong Shou. Following which she scoffed, temporarily not bothering with him. Only then did Zhong Shou relax, straightening up and sizing up the surrounding environment. It should be a guest room. The decorations were simple but clean and elegant. Everything was exquisite and expensive. Looking out of the window, it should be a high ground. Looking down from the window, one could see the entire Xian mountain city. That's right, how did he fall asleep? Why was he here? Thinking back, when he woke up, wasn't he in the Taigang Hall at the peak of Xian Mountain? He was prepared to use his eloquence to convince Xianyuan Tong to marry his daughter to him. At the same time, he wanted to show off his talents, his achievements in both martial and spiritual paths, making those people's jaws drop to the ground. What happened after that? At that time, he seemed to have drunk a few cups of wine with Xianyuan Tong and ended up a little drunk. Suddenly, a bad feeling rose up in his heart. Zhong Shou turned his head mechanically, forcing a smile as he asked Xianyuan Iran, Iran, I seem to be drunk and confused. Did anything happen after that? What did my father-in-law say? Why don't I see him again? In his last life, before he completed his martial path, he had gotten drunk a few times and was dead drunk. However, his alcohol tolerance had always been good, so there shouldn't be any problems. He felt guilty in his heart at such an important moment. He was the one who got drunk. Iran would definitely be sad. Xianyuan Iran didn't say a word, coldly staring at him. Just as Zhong Shoxin felt a chill down his spine, she finally opened her mouth. Nothing big happened, only you beat up my uncle Luoyan, using the back of your sword to beat him up until his head was swollen. Zhong Shou held his breath, coughing a few times to vent the shock in his chest. He remembered that at that time, he did want to beat this fellow up. Why did he really do it? A short while later, he barely regained his composure. Zhong Shou wasn't focused, picking up a cup of tea on the table beside him, expressionlessly asking, what happened after that? Then it was my Uncle Zhu, you didn't hit him, but you only used one move to be suppressed by him. Later on, you hit Uncle Tan. 2 swords on the left and right, 2 loud slaps on the face. Zhong Shou's hand instantly trembled slightly. Then, he regained his composure. Since he had already beaten Luoyan into a pighead, then beating up these two wasn't much. Speaking of which, that Tan Tao actually really wanted to beat him up. That cunning fellow, why did he only slap him twice? Then what happened after that? Chapter 190. Then, Xianyuan Iran's eyes squinted. Then you used 4 cloud pattern flying knives to nail my senior brother Fang Shu to the stone pillar. 2 on his calf and 2 on his shoulder. Only after 4 hours did he remove the knife. Till now, he still hasn't expelled your cloud-shocking god-destroying sword intent. I heard that it was very painful, and he was crying out like a pig being slaughtered. Zhong Shou was instantly delighted, feeling delighted in his heart. He disliked disciples like Long Batian and Fang Shu, who had their noses in the air and tails in the air, the most. Before this, Fang Shu's words were the most unpleasant to hear. Hearing that he had nailed this person with flying knives, he was instantly delighted, and his thoughts flowed smoothly. Slow down, flying knives? Zhong Shou touched his sleeves. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. His heart was filled with pain. The cloud-pattern flying knives that he had spent so much effort to nurture for several months were gone just like that? A flying dagger that could kill 4 Wuzongs was used on a piece of trash like him? One knife could have settled him. His heart tightened. Zhong Shou took a long while before he came back to his senses. He consoled himself that this was not bad. At that time, he was definitely very handsome and cool. What happened after that? What else did I do? Iren, say it all in one breath, I will just listen. After that. Xianyuan Iren hesitated, saying with a straight face, You beat up my father. Zhong Shou was drinking tea. When he heard that, he couldn't help but spit out. The water in his mouth was all spat out. Like the surface of a fan, it covered a small half of the room. Xianyuan Iren seemed to have expected it and dodged in advance. Zhong Shou felt that something wasn't right, thinking about it carefully. His face calmed down. Iren, you have learned bad things. You don't even think of a plan to lie to people. My father-in-law is already at the peak of the 9 meridians of the Earth Chakra realm and is only half a step away from the Ascended realm. Even if there were 10 of me, I wouldn't be his opponent. How could I beat him up? What nonsense are you talking about? With the same level of strength, if paired with top-notch techniques, they would be able to unleash a battle prowess that was several times or even tens of times greater than others. However, if the disparity between the two of them was truly too enormous, it would simply be impossible for them to contend against one another. Beating up Tan Tao and Luoxian was a piece of cake. Although the two of them were Xuanwu ancestors, their martial path was only average. At most, they were only slightly stronger than people of the same grade. As for Zhu Junho, if he could catch him off guard and make a quick move before he could figure out what was going on, he would be able to do it. Zhong Shou was also somewhat confident that he could take him down. However, if he was facing Xianyuan Tong, who had been at the peak of 9 meridians for many years, he could only run as far away as he could. He firmly expressed that he didn't believe Iren's words. She was clearly scaring him. Xianyuan Iren was speechless, following which she continued, You even scolded my father for being an old man pretending to be young. Zhong Shou was completely petrified. He only felt that he was not far from turning into dust. How could he say something like that? If Xianyuan Tong was an old man pretending to be young, then what was he? A bad middle-aged uncle wearing the skin of a Shota? Pooey. Pooey. What middle-aged uncle? In his last life, when he fainted in the God Emperor game, he was still in his prime, a tender young man. How could he have anything to do with such a weird being like an uncle? As expected, drinking messes up matters. Before he solved the flaws of his world-shocking energy, he had to not touch a single drop of alcohol. Just as he was reflecting in his heart, Xianyuan Iren shook her head. You did all these things after you were drunk. Father said that your cultivation method still has flaws and you temporarily can't drink alcohol. It was his fault for saying those words that were too hurtful and provoked you. So I don't blame you. Only. She paused, her voice suddenly became lower. But why did you let Hu Zhongyuan scold you with such ugly words when you charged into the city? Zhong Shou, did you really think that in your heart? Zhong Shou was slightly startled, the danger warning in his heart suddenly raised to the highest level. Pretty much without thinking, he betrayed Hu Zhongyuan, his face full of righteousness. No, although I let Hu Zhongyuan scold and cause trouble, I was really respectful to father-in-law. In the end, that fellow lost control the moment he entered the city, and couldn't be stopped. Later I will go beat him up to help you vent your anger. I will make him unable to climb up for 10 to 15 days. As expected, Xianyuan Iren was half believing and half doubtful, suspiciously staring at Zhong Shou's eyes. Seeing that it was filled with sincerity and she couldn't see any flaws, she retracted her gaze. Following which her eyes suddenly turned red, a mist rising in her eyes. Zhong Shou, are you bullying me? That extremely wronged look was beautiful to the extreme at that moment. Zhong Shoxin's heart jumped, following which he felt a headache. This move again. Pretty much invincible for the entire afternoon, Zhong Shou accompanied Xianyuan Iren to run around. As expected from a girl who had the words benevolent and righteous. First, she found those people who were injured, treating them one by one and consoling them with warm word. Her pill-refining talent was top-notch, and her medical skills were even better. No matter how heavy the injuries were, she would be able to bring them back to life and even give them some benefits. And if they were unlucky and were injured by Zhong Yuan and couldn't be healed, they would be unable to cultivate anymore. She would either give them a huge sum of money or use other methods to compensate. In the end, all the people who were injured because of this matter were all grateful to Xianyuan Iren and didn't have any grievances at all. However, they didn't have any good expressions on their faces, all of them staring coldly at him, wanting to use their gazes to skin him alive. Zhong Shou didn't care much, anyways he was mentally prepared. He stood there like a wooden statue, his face wooden and determined not to apologize. It wasn't his fault anyway. However, after that, these people were well behaved, bowing and saluting, and calling him young city lord, which made him stunned. Then, he broke out into a laugh and accepted it. Next, it was those merchants and people who were injured. That was simple. Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Yuan both disdained to attack normal people. Since no one died, the compensation was really simple, they just needed to give enough money. After this round of work, it was already night time. Zhong Shou looked on from the side and was shocked. Although his fiancée talked about being benevolent and righteous, her brain seemed to have been taught by Xianyuan Tong. She might be more suitable than him to be the monster king of Gantian Mountain. She treated people and things well, not being arrogant at all. She was also skilled, but it wasn't that she wasn't scheming. For example, when compensating, she didn't just give them money. Be it pills or martial arts manuals that were suitable for them, or recommending their children to study under a great teacher, or solving their urgent needs. All of these were things that these people needed the most. In the end, she injured them and received a basket of gratitude. Looking at the situation of a few of them, they had already turned into loyal dogs, pledging their lives to her. As long as Xianyuan Iren said a word, they would go all out for her. At the same time, they hated Zhong Shou to the bone for snatching away Xianyuan Iren. Just like that, he easily and skillfully resolved this storm that might have caused dissatisfaction. It made Zhong Shou really emotional. If this Xianyuan Iren was born in the future, she would definitely be a strong woman, able to call the wind and summon the rain in the political arena. How could she be like him, who was just a martial artist? At the end were the three people that he had personally beaten up. Zhong Shou was even more unwilling. His personality was one that was quick to take revenge. If he beat them up, then so be it. If they wanted to take revenge, then they could just come at him. When had Zhong Shou ever feared anything? However, Iren said that it was better to squash enmity than keep it alive. These people were her uncles who watched her grow up and were already his subordinate. Were they going to be at a standstill? Zhong Shou was helpless and could only be forcefully pulled by Xianyuan Iren to search for the three of them. As expected, Luo Xian was beaten up into a pig's head. His head was tightly wrapped in bandages. It swelled up by close to double, only revealing a pair of red and swollen eyes. However, this person was really straightforward, not waiting for Xianyuan Iren to apologize to him. He said in a low and muffled voice, "Seeing that you all aren't sincere, there is no need to be so fake. Yesterday was my fault, I shouldn't have scolded you. I was also ignorant and didn't know that you were strong. Old Luo, admire people who are capable. Although you beat me up, I am convinced. You didn't use any tricks and didn't cheat. You won fair and square. To be able to defeat the city lord in one move, I didn't lose unjustly and didn't lose face." When Zhong Shou heard this, he was startled. Did he really beat up that Xianyuan Tong? That can't be, with his little strength. How could he win? That's right, this Luo Xian was finding a way out for him. To slander the city lord for his own face, he couldn't do that. In the future, he had to be careful. Luo Xian's tone changed as he said that, however, I will remember this debt. In the future, if my martial path is good, I will beat you fair and square. I will take back all of this debt." As he spoke, his head that was half a time bigger than before was lowered, his voice was really low. It was obvious that he didn't have much confidence, following which it was Tan Tao. His situation was slightly better than Luo Xian's. However, his face was also covered with a veil. When they met, he didn't speak, just looking at Zhong Shou, who was also expressionless. Xianyuan Iran tugged at Zhong Shou's sleeves. Just as Zhong Shou was getting impatient, Tan Tao opened his mouth expressionlessly. "Little miss doesn't need to force the prince, and there is no need to apologize. Yesterday's matter was my fault. Speaking of which, I should feel fortunate. If it was anyone else, with the ability of the prince, they might not have ended up like this. If I did things like this, there might be blood. I also feel fortunate that the city lord could get such a good son-in-law. Xian Mountain City has a successor. Oh right, there is another thing to tell you. Before you met the city lord, I ordered people to send the news to Blazing Flame Mountain and Yunxia Mountain. In the end, it was too late to regret it. In a few days, the prince will see their men." Zhong Shou was startled once more, thinking to himself that this was a vicious person, really vicious. He was really vicious and didn't leave any room for negotiation. After he was drunk, why did he only hit Tan Tao twice? It was far from enough. If he knew that this would happen, he would have viciously hit him. On the contrary, that Luo Xian only had a bad temper and a bad mouth, but his temper was really direct. This made him feel really apologetic in his heart. To be continued. Chapter 191. Tan Tao also knew that this matter wasn't appropriate, sighing, "If the prince and little miss want to blame me, then I'll accept it. I know that in your eyes, I, Tan Tao, must be a sinister and vicious person. This is the truth, and I won't try to explain. I just want the prince to know that in this world, everyone's heart is biased. No matter how fair a person is, it is still the same. They would only want their family and friends to be better off and not want them to get into trouble. For example, little miss, if you have a bun in your hand and your mother and a stranger are starving to death, are you willing to give the bun to your mother or watch her starve to death?" Xianyuan Iran kept silent, her expression didn't change. The hand that held Zhong Shou tightened slightly. When Tan Tao saw that, he laughed out loud. "Little Miss Iran really isn't a pedantic person. If you want to talk about benevolence and righteousness, then take the bun to save others. I, Tan Tao, will definitely slay you with one knife. You don't even care about the people around you. What rights do you have to talk about benevolence and righteousness?" Zhong Shou's brows rose up in shock. This Tan Tao was surprisingly interesting. Only to hear him open his mouth. "In the early years, I made enemies when I was young and rash. I was saved by the city lord who was roaming the central continent. A few years ago at Ruahai Straits, due to the help of the Gantian Mountain Monster King, I was able to escape. However, in my eyes, the city lord saved me out of sincerity and selflessness. He is also my bread and butter. As for your father, he had his own goals for saving me. The relationship between the two of us is obvious. The Gantian Mountain situation is too chaotic, and if things go wrong he would be smashed to pieces. Even the city lord might not have a good ending. So even though I know that Xian Mountain City needs to rely on the support of Gantian Mountain, I still went all out to let the city lord and Xian Mountain City get out of this whirlpool. Even if I am scolded for being ungrateful, I don't care." Zhong Shouxin's doubts were solved, but in his heart, he understood. He still didn't like Tan Tao. He didn't want to have a deep relationship with him. The two of them didn't stop here for long, arriving at Zhu Juanho's residence. However, in this place where one wouldn't be rejected, Zhong Shou was solidly shut out. Based on the explanation of the General Zhu's housekeeper, his master was in secluded meditation. He said that if he couldn't beat a brat and beat him, he wouldn't come out. As for who that brat was, the housekeeper's mouth Zhong Shou couldn't help but touch his nose and laugh bitterly. So this Zhu Juanho's general's Gantian's tempers. Looking at the situation, he's to Gantian's tea. In the end to the Gantian, to the Gantian, to the Gantian, to the Gantian, to the Gantian Antian. T to his to say, T to be to T to see to his to see his to make him to see his to see T that. Although Lisina didn't go overboard with her words in front of him, she didn't say anything. However, he could see that this middle-aged woman was prideful and wasn't willing to admit defeat. Yesterday he had stabbed her with a few words, so she might not be able to lower her face to see him. However, when they turned around a majestic fake mountain and stepped into a lake, Zhong Shou's pupils constricted. Only to see that in the center of the lake, within a really elegant wooden pavilion, there was a really young and handsome man in a brocade robe sitting beside a stone seat, looking at the lake excitedly. Zhong Shou was naturally familiar with his face. Not only did he have it in his 13 years of memories, but he had also spoken to him face to face yesterday. Wasn't this the old man he scolded for acting young, the Xian Mountain City Lord, his future father-in-law, Xian Yuan Tong? He couldn't help but feel awkward and nervous. He could smile at that life and death battle, but his expression didn't change as he passed through the knife light and sword shadows. At this moment, he suddenly felt a little afraid. He wanted to sneak away, but Xianyuan Iren stared at him so he couldn't. Following which he thought that if he stuck out his head, he would be stabbed. He gritted his teeth and openly walked over from the wooden corridor above the water. He walked in front of Xianyuan Tong and bowed, only to see Xianyuan Tong turn around and give a friendly smile, waving his sleeves. Sit. When Zhong Shou sat down without any hesitation, he personally held a copper pot and filled the 2 cups in front of him. One of the cups was personally delivered to Zhong Shou. The liquid in the cup was amber in color, smelling really sweet, making one's appetite rise. However, when Xianyuan Tong raised the cup, Zhong Shou felt really awkward, forcing a smile. Father-in-law, please help yourself, Zhong Shou can't drink wine now. When Xianyuan Tong heard that, he was delighted, shaking his head. How would I not know? Even if you want to drink, I won't give it to you. I am afraid that you will beat up my subordinates. Don't worry, it is just jam. Zhong Shou relaxed slightly, drinking it in one gulp. As expected, although the taste was sweet and delicious, it didn't have the mellowness of wine. He sighed in his heart. The days of drinking and drinking meat were probably far away from him. To think he found so much monkey wine that could be used as celestial brew to wash his body and flush his chakras. However, today it all benefited Chu Shui, that glutton. Following which he sized up Xianyuan Tong, thinking to himself that since his father-in-law was able to walk out of the Taigang Hall, did his hidden injuries and cultivation method problems solve. Speaking of which, just now when Xianyuan Tong sat in the pavilion, he was actually one with the lake and heaven and earth, not forcing himself at all. In front of him, his aura was neither strong nor weak, simple and unpretentious, calm and harmonious. That true qi, even if it wasn't suppressed by the Taigang Hall, was retracted to a barely discernible level. Looking at the situation, it seemed like his martial path had greatly improved. Taking a close look, only to see that Xianyuan Tong's body didn't have any injuries, there weren't any bruises. Only his 2 sleeves, for some reason, seemed especially wide. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. As expected, Xianyuan Iren was just scaring him. This Xianyuan Tong was comprehending heaven and earth. In just tens of days, he could step into the ascended ancestor realm. How could he win against him? Your father doesn't like to drink, this fragrant nectar is his favorite thing. I heard that your mother also likes it. Is it good? Zhong Shou nodded his head. Xianyuan Tong smiled in satisfaction, directly going into the main topic, expressionlessly saying, Today I asked Xianyuan Iren to call you over. The first reason is because of her. I only have one daughter, I love her like a pearl. In the future, I will hand it to you, don't let her suffer. If not, even if I go all out, I will chop off your head." Before he finished, he was interrupted by Zhong Shou. "Father-in-law doesn't need to explain this matter. I, Zhong Shou, am a man, how would I let my woman suffer?" Xianyuan Tong broke out into a laugh. Although Zhong Shou didn't swear, at this moment he sat there quietly, giving one a sense of peace. Like he could rely on anything, like even if the sky collapsed, he would be able to hold it up. His eyes lit up, not speaking about this matter anymore, his tone changing. "Then let's talk about another matter. Do you know about the Dragon Canyon?" Samuraim's eyes instantly shrunk, looking at Xianyuan Tong, not understanding what he meant. Dragon Canyon, naturally he had heard of it, and it was like thunder to his ears. When he was the Sword Emperor Tanchio, he had taken a trip there. In the God Emperor game, it was a huge instance dungeon with a series of quests. It was also connected to tens of ancient treasures. Xianyuan Tong didn't look at his expression, calmly describing, "Roughly 2 years ago, who knows where the news spread out. It was said that within this Dragon Canyon, there were martial celestial ruins from the Cloud Desolate era. There were numerous ancient martial path legacies. There were even rumors that the Book of Extreme Life of the 2 books of the universe was also within. It caused the various sects of Donglin Cloud Continent to be in an uproar. The various large cities in the west of Donglin Cloud Continent all started to." Zhong Shou's heart was crazily shocked. Book of Extreme Life? In his last life, he was in the virtual world. When he snatched the book, he suddenly fainted. Actually, during this period of time, he had many questions in his heart. How did a spiritual technique book made in the game cause him to come to this era? Or was there some other reason? When this news spread out, it was really weird. Weiran and I sent people in to investigate. 2 8-meridian Xuanwu masters chose a specific time to avoid the Dragon within the canyon and went deep within. They noticed that there were indeed ruins from 10,000 years ago. The words of the Book of Extreme Life were mostly fake. However, those treasures and legacy martial arts from the Cloud Desolate era were real. Moreover, the date of its appearance should be within these few years. As Xianyuan Tong said that, he smiled helplessly. Then, the other cities and sects all found out. However, there were many hidden currents. Those knives and arrows started to swarm towards Gantian Mountain. Your father's defeat was due to his strong expansion and enmity with many sections. It was also due to this Dragon Canyon. Zhong Shou frowned slightly. He wasn't dumb enough to ask Xianyuan Tong, what did Zhong Weiran being forced into the Oblivion Cloud Ocean have to do with the Dragon Canyon? That Dragon Canyon was located 1,300 miles south of Gantian Mountain. If Zhong Weiran was still here, Gantian Mountain would be at its peak. With the strength of the 9 provinces, even Lingyun's sect would have to retreat. As the owner, he could decide where most of the treasures in the canyon would end up. Even today, Gantian Mountain was still extremely important and attracted the attention of many sections. The heavens didn't bless your father. If he had 10 more years to stabilize the 9 provinces under him and swallow up Yunxia Mountain and Blazing Flame Mountain, leading tens of millions of monsters to build a dynasty in Donglin Cloud Continent wouldn't be a problem. However, at such a crucial time, such a change occurred, causing him to be unable to deal with it. Xianyuan Tong sighed slightly, like he was filled with endless regret. He continued, however, your father is a decisive person. Seeing that things couldn't be done, he decisively gave up. Roughly half a year ago, who knows where he found 3 barrier-breaking talismans passed down from the ancient times and personally headed into the canyon. He was prepared to go all out. If he could find some top treasures, he might be able to solve the danger of the canyon. If not, he was prepared to give up his position and avoid the sharpness of the sects. Chapter 192. In the end, I don't know what your father managed to obtain in the Dragon Valley, or what he managed to gain. I only know that after he came out that day, he rushed to the south. Then, he was surrounded by more than 20 ascended martial grandmasters. Your father was strong and killed 3 of them. Only when 5 grandmasters attacked did he escape and was forced into the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. Zhong Shou's heart shook when he heard that, thinking to himself that his father was actually strong to such an extent. 20 over-ascended martial ancestors joined forces and still managed to kill 3 people. Even grandmasters weren't able to take them down. This terrifying battle record was no less than a few years later when he killed his way up Pill Spirit Mountain. Xianyuan Tong said that Zhong Weiran had reached the Ascended Ancestor realm 6 years ago. Calculating his age, at that time, wasn't his father only a little over 27 years old? At this moment, he was suspecting whether or not Zhong Weiran transmigrated from the future and had high martial path achievements in the past. Legend has it that little brother Weiran obtained the Book of Ian Extreme Life in the Dragon Canyon, which was why he went to the south. However, this news is most probably fake. Xianyuan Tong laughed coldly, filled with a mocking intent. Since ancient times, it is known as Ian, the 4 directions are known as the universe. That Book of Ian Extreme Life is the top treasure book of spiritual cultivation. Legend has it that it has the ability to control time and even reverse time. How could such a treasure land in the remains of a martial celestial? If it really is that item, not only would the 3 vast habitats, 5 heavenly places, 10 shrines, 19 spiritual houses all fight to the death. Even people from other worlds would not care about anything to come to our cloud world to fight for it. Those people really don't want to give up on your father. Luckily, rumors stop with the wise. Apart from a few spiritual houses and sects, the other 10 shrines don't believe in this matter. Zhong Shou scoffed, thinking that the Book of Ian Extreme Life in his guesses was at most a spirit master treasure book. Out of all talisman laws, the most mysterious and complicated ones were the universe and Ian talismans that were the hardest to grasp. What ability to control time and reverse time, wasn't that a little too much? It was most probably just a rumor. However, his heart sank as he recalled the strange things that had happened to him. Strangely, he remembered what Zhong Shou had said before his soul dissipated. You'll find out sooner or later anyway. You will also know that I am you and you are me. The 2 of them were originally one. These words sounded strange, no matter how he listened to them. Now that he thought about it, it added a sense of unpredictability. There was even that unknown ball of light hidden in the deepest part of his essence soul. That Zhong Shou, even if he said that he did not know much, he only knew that it was something he brought over himself, so why bother asking him? In recent months, Zhong Shou had been burying this matter in the bottom of his heart. At this moment, he seemed to have comprehended something. Could it be that this sapphire blue ball of light is that Book of Ian Extreme Life? Then he burst out laughing. How could the virtual treasures in the game be real? Even if it was this treasure that brought him to travel through 10,000 years. How could he explain why this item would fall into his hands, and why his soul coincidentally woke up in the body of this Zhong Shou? There were many questions in his heart, but this matter was indeed too preposterous. Zhong Shou directly rejected those possibilities, not thinking about it anymore, quietly listening to Xianyuan Tong continue. This is also the reason why I said before that your father might still be in this world. He wasn't forced into the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, but he planned to use this place to hide. Within that Dragon Canyon, Weiran definitely obtained something, but it wasn't enough to change the situation. Naturally, there is another possibility, which is that the thing he obtained was so good that it could attract a huge calamity. However, I think that possibility is really small. After Xianyuan Tong said that, he took in a deep breath before coming to the main topic. Although Brother Weiran has left, the battle for Dragon Canyon is getting more and more intense. Not only the few sects in Donglin Cloud Continent, even the Central Cloud Continent has people interfering. So this Gantian Mountain Monster King battle is far from as simple as it looks on the surface. That Zhong Shi isn't just relying on the strength of his master Lan Yi, a 9-meridian Xuanwu ancestor. Even if he is about to step into the Ascended Realm, how much power and ability can he have? Not to mention me, even Hu Qianqiu, with the strength of 100,000 tiger race troops, even if this Lan Yi cultivator stepped into the Ascended Realm, it would be enough to kill him. Only because Zhong Shi, Zhong Yang, and your uncle Zhong Xiuan all have sects supporting them were they able to suppress the people Weiran left behind to fight for the Monster King position. Zhong Shi's eyes squinted as he laughed. He had expected this, but he didn't understand the reason. However, along with the martial celestial ruins that were about to appear, then all the mysteries were solved. Since someone is acting from within, then naturally there will be people playing chess from outside. West of Donglin Cloud Continent, apart from Gantian Mountain, Yunxia Mountain, Blazing Flame Mountain, there is also Taoyuan City in the West Ocean who can move millions of troops. Roughly 4 months ago, the Yin Canyon suddenly exploded with spiritual energy. The sects all thought that the ruins were about to appear. Not only did Yunxia Mountain send their most elite Fire Wolf cavalry to Dongwei Mountain, Blazing Flame Mountain also sent troops. Taoyuan City sent 300 cloud ships 2,200 miles west of Gantian Mountain. In the end, it was a false alarm. However, it also caused the 3 powers within Gantian Mountain to temporarily join hands. Xianyuan Tong's tone was really calm as he described the situation of Gantian Mountain these few months. However, when Zhong Shi heard it, his heart jumped. Although Yin Yang and Hu Zhongyuan had described the situation over there to him in detail. However, these 2 people definitely couldn't be like Xianyuan Tong, who knew the situation like the back of his hand. The questions that he had accumulated before were all answered. So after I weighed the pros and cons, I decided not to interfere in the situation of Gantian Mountain. The situation over there was the most sensitive, and could explode at any moment. If you don't fight it's okay, but the moment I help you, we will be fine. We can be unharmed, but others will only target your greatest weakness. You don't know martial arts, so even if Hu Qianqiu and I work together, we won't be able to protect you. We will only harm you. As he said that, Xianyuan Tong smiled. However, it is different now. In the past, I didn't even dare to think about it. However, today, even if you don't fight for the Monster King position, Hu Qianqiu and I won't agree. How can Weiran's hard work to build up land in the hands of others? Moreover, today we more or less have some chances of winning. He smiled as he looked at Zhong Shi with a testing intent. Does the prince know why? When Brother Weiran was there, we had no chance of winning. However, if it was you, how much chance do we have? Zhong Shi didn't hesitate and shook his head. How can the situation be the same? When my father was the Monster King, he was the target of everyone. But now I can form alliances with both sides. Since Zhong Shi and the others can rely on hidden sects, I can choose a spiritual house sect to work with. Xianyuan Tong instantly laughed out loud, filled with endless joy. That's right. You are really smart. As expected from Brother Weiran's son. You really know how to say it. That is the theory. What we want is to take back the Monster King position of Gantian Mountain. As for that Dragon Canyon, it is best if we can get some benefits, but it doesn't matter if we can't. Within those 19 spiritual houses, we don't have to worry about not finding people to work with. So, this time when you return to Gantian Mountain, what you need to be most careful of is those 3 working together. The last few sentences were really solemn. Zhong Shi's heart shuddered, thinking about how he should have been brought back to Gantian Mountain by Zhong Xiuan and Zhong Yang to be a puppet. A year later, Zhong Shi would explode out and chop off his head. As for those 2, They didn't even say a word before submitting to Zhongshe. Thinking about it, they must have gone through countless battles in the dark. If they couldn't swallow it all, then compromising with other sects was a good idea. Speaking of which, in his memory, this Xian mountain city also disappeared in this era. He only remembered that 2 years later, near the most important passage between Xian Mountain City and Gantian Mountain City, Ruahai Straits, there was a war of 1 million people. 4 years later, Linlan City in the north of Tianlan Province rose up and took control of Xian Mountain City. Only Xianyuan Tong, Xianyuan Iran and the people in the city. As for what fate he had at that time, he didn't know. However, at that time, his head was hanging on Gantian Mountain Peak for 3 months, and there was actually no one guarding his corpse. With Xianyuan Iran's personality, how could she be so heartless? There was also the Iron Tiger race. When the God Emperor game started, this race didn't exist anymore. Zhongshe only felt a heavy pressure descend on his heart once more. This trip to Gantian Mountain would still be filled with many dangers and dangers. After Xianyuan Tong said those words, his expression turned warm. He didn't talk about that boring matter anymore. He forcefully pulled Zhongshe and talked about everything. He suddenly recalled the past and talked about how he met Zhongshe's father in the Central Cloud continent. He suddenly talked about the interesting things of Xianyuan Iran when she was young, causing her to pout. He continued to ramble on for a long time. Only until dawn did he let go of Zhongshe. When Zhongshe left the small pavilion in the middle of the lake and turned around to look, only that Xianyuan Tong was still drinking by himself, laughing out loud without any elegance, his eyes filled with drunkenness. It caused Xianyuan Iran, who was serving beside him, to have a huge headache. However, what was inside the copper pot was not wine, but jam. However, Xianyuan Tong was already drunk. Zhongshe smiled and left the manor. However, just as he stepped out of the door, he felt a cold intent spread all over his body. A killing intent, who knows where it came from, spreading over from afar. Zhongshe's brows furrowed as he looked towards the east. With the amount of time that had passed, the person near Cloud Saint City most probably already knew 10,000 miles away, in a series of houses built in a valley, there was a house in the most eerie and secluded part of the house. Along with an explosion, a white and flawless mined stone was crushed into pieces by an eagle claw. "You actually dare to kill my disciple." The voice was dark and cold, but also filled with a majestic aura. The owner of the hand had eagle eyes and a hook nose, looking similar to Cho Ling. At this moment his chest was rising and falling like he was furious to the extreme. "It was really done by the Gantian Mountain Prince, are you sure?" In front of this person stood a black-robed old man. His face was covered in cold sweat as he bowed. "I definitely wouldn't dare to lie to Master." The person that Cho Ling and Yun Su suspected was the Gantian Mountain Prince. With my guess, it was most probably the prince's subordinates who killed Cho Ling and Yun Su. However, I remember that this Zhongshe was unable to cultivate? His father is already dead, so how could he have such an expert under him? That eagle-eyed man frowned, following which he waved his hand without much care. "It doesn't matter if it is or not. Bring a few Xuanwu masters over. It is best if you can kill this kid and the people around him. If things don't work out, I will personally take action and end his life." Chapter 193. Although Zhongshe had reached the initial Xiantian realm, be it the 6-god defensive knife technique or his sword techniques, he was able to use a portion of power. However, what he looked forward to the most was the sword embryo in his soul. Recently, his energy cultivation had improved really quickly. However, no matter how fast it wasn't as fast as his spiritual cultivation. The growth of his soul was pretty much increasing by the day. Even if his physical body used the essence of the lightning phoenix egg, it still couldn't catch up. Pretty much every 10 days he could step onto a new stage. The strength of his soul would also cause this one origin sword to become stronger and continue to grow. Using his mind to control it for a moment, it caused the lightning-winged sword to slowly merge with his illusionary spirit sword and his second soul. Zhong Shou entered meditation once more and started to form true talismans in his soul ocean. Pretty much in a blink of an eye, a talisman pattern had formed along with his will and mixed into the talisman ocean. Compared to the speed of the past, it was tens of times faster. However, such a phenomenon had actually started yesterday. Zhong Shou didn't find it surprising, he was just curious. Weird. How did my true talisman form so quickly? These 2 days were pretty much the same as the last 2 months added together. If this goes on, in just a few days I can form another true talisman. It was like the potential of his soul had exploded out. However, apart from beating up those 3 people, I didn't do much. Did I have a fierce battle with that Zhu Junho? However, with his martial path cultivation, if I wasn't able to suppress him at the start, I would have lost. He would definitely be defeated, suppressed by the other party instead. This matter is so weird. Zhong Shou shook his head and continued to focus his mind and meditate. 4 hours later, there were tens of true talismans floating in his soul ocean. He wasn't far away from the next true talisman. The potential that was ignited didn't show any signs of exhaustion. What was surprising was that the strength of his soul and the true qi in his body weren't like fire and water like before. Even though it was far from perfect harmony, it was no longer an intense rejection. Between them, well water does not interfere with river water. And the conflict between the two forces reduced the level of his control. His cultivation immediately showed signs of advancing by leaps and bounds. Zhong Shou, however, was worried that it would be inappropriate to act rashly, so he temporarily held back. Then, in the deepest part of the Soul Sea, the water and fire true talismans started to stir the 12 heavenly talisman seeds outside his Soul Sea. One could sense that many threads were extending from the true spiritual talisman and connecting with the heaven talisman seeds. In particular, the 2 words water and fire were especially close. Step by step, he was being pulled towards the center of the Soul Sea whirlpool. This was the merging process. Once it was completed, Zhong Shou's fire and water element spells would instantly strengthen to the God Talisman level. Even now, his spell power had increased by close to 50%. The entire process took half a day. When Zhong Shou finished, it was already noon. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Chu Shui, who was sleeping on the bed, had already woken up in a daze. The two of them stared at one another for a while. Chu Shui finally recalled what happened before she fainted. Her face flushed red. After she screamed out, she wrapped up Zhong Shou's blanket and ran out of the door like a maniac. Zhong Shou laughed when he saw that and stood up. What ignited his potential was not only his soul. His physical body was like a small stream turning into a river, unceasingly surging out from the depths of his body. He consumed a blood yang pill that could strengthen his vital energy and make his blood essence more masculine. He also consumed one each of the 9 refinement jade pill and vast spirit pill. The former was used to train the body, the latter was used to increase one's ability to absorb heaven and earth spiritual energy in a short time. Zhong Shou first used the 4th energy leading technique to merge the medicinal effects into his body. Then, when the spiritual energy around his body suddenly increased, he punched out. Only then did he punch out with both fists. His strength was no weaker than the great blazing sun fist, causing the entire 9-story building to shake. Stepping out, he had tens of thousands of kilograms of strength. Luckily, the entire building was made up of 12 300-foot-long giant wooden pillars. The floor was also really solid, pretty much able to be used as steel. He had seen it before, which was why he was fine. This was the Demon Rhino Spirit Armor Fist, another body training fist technique. Zhong Shou had learned numerous body training fist technique. There were also more than 30 top-notch unique skills. However, he only chose 4 of them. Foundation Breathing Spiritual Fist, Great Blazing Sun Fist, Little 5 Chakra Wisdom King Fist, Demon Rhino Spirit Armor Fist. 4 sets of fist techniques connected to one another. It could train the foundation breathing, bone marrow, vital energy, 5 organs, 6 organs, skin and flesh. The 9 chakras in his body were all included within. Be it internal or external, it could be used all the way to the 9 meridians of the heaven chakra realm, amongst which the Great Blazing Sun Fist and the Demon Rhino Spirit Armor Fist came from the monster race. As for the Spiritual Breathing Fist and the 5-wheel Enlightened King Fist, they were Buddhist techniques and didn't conflict with the body of the monster race. This Demon Rhino Spirit Armor Fist was a skin, bone and tendons technique. It was said that once one cultivated it to the peak, the skin on one's body would be as tough as the Demon Rhino Spirit Armor. It could be like the Demon Rhino Armor, extremely firm. All grade 7 and below spiritual weapons could be ignored. If one's bone and flesh foundations were a little stronger, it wasn't impossible to go head-on against grade 8 spiritual weapons. Along with this fist technique being used, the 9 refinement jade pill slowly merged into his skin. It caused Zhong Shou's body to exude a white jade-like color. It was transparent and flawless, like it was really made of jade. Although this spiritual pill was grade 3, it was a rare body training pill and was one of the secret techniques of Pill Fountain sect. It could cause the skin of a cultivator to turn into a jade color. After consuming it, one could return to normal skin color. After a few more months, the color would change a total of 9 times. Depending on one's talent, the skin would be strengthened by 5 to 10 times. His skin was as tough as steel and hard for knives and swords to damage. At this moment, along with the Demon Rhino Spirit Armor Fist, it was really effective. Outside of his body, it was like he was wearing a layer of armor. There was also a vast amount of spiritual energy that was absorbed into his body and mixed with the true chi. Within the chakra, it would bulge and expand, clearing out the narrow areas that were still blocked up. It also continuously expanded the meridians and compressed the true chi in Zhong Shou's body. His vital energy was also boiling, merging the yang power of the blood sun pill into it. After breaking through the body chakra realm and reaching the earth chakra realm, there were no more obstructions in his meridians. At this moment, the most important thing was to expand his meridians and increase the strength of his true chi. The former needed to be accumulated over a long period of time. The latter needed to be cultivated and condensed to increase the yang power within the true chi, to make it purer. On the other hand, it would be to form a stronger martial path intent that was more compatible with heaven and earth. It would also allow true chi to gather more. Zhong Yuan was able to kill a martial ancestor expert when he was at the peak of the Xiantian realm. That was because he had comprehended the strength of the martial path at the Xiantian realm. He could explode out strength comparable to a martial ancestor in a short period of time. The reason why he hadn't broken through was also because of the flaws in his martial path. Shosho had the martial path cultivation of his last life, so there was no problem in this area. What he lacked now was the refining of his true chi. Next would be body training. He was training his fist within the whirlpool and his physical body was close to the peak Xiantian realm. However, at this moment, he actually saw a huge increase. Not only was the potential of his physical body still at an extremely high level, the effects of this pill were also terrifying. Although the Lightning Phoenix essence was good, it wasn't as good as Xianyuan Iran's pills, which focused on strengthening the body. As expected, it is a top-grade pill. However, the yang power in my bloodline strengthening actually didn't affect my soul. I really don't understand. Why was there such a huge change all of a sudden? What cultivators' souls feared the most was blood energy and yang power, as well as dirty things. The former naturally conflicted with Yin's souls, while the latter could contaminate the soul. Which was why the best way to deal with spirit cultivators below the return to Sun Realm was to use black dog blood to splash them. However, at this moment, Zhong Shou was a dual cultivator and the soul in his body wasn't affected at all. Forget it. This is a good thing. My spiritual cultivation and true qi are progressing really quickly. Anyways, I have to wait for the pills that Iran refined to come out. I still have tens of days to stay in this Xian mountain city. Why not just focus on cultivating for a while more? Who knows if my cultivation will be able to rise to another level at that time. On the martial path, each stage is tough. However, this spiritual cultivation has a lot of potential. When the Rhino Spirit Armor Fist reached the extreme, Zhong Shou's body was covered in a thick layer of earth element spiritual energy. However, at this moment, his eyes were slightly distracted. To form a true spiritual talisman with his current speed, he only needed tens of days. The number of true spiritual talismans in his body would directly affect the strength of the illusionary spirit crafting sword technique. His one origin sword would definitely be a few times stronger. Unfortunately, although he had a sword embryo, he didn't have a suitable sword cultivation and soul cultivation method. Even if he wanted to create one himself, he didn't have much experience. It really made him anxious. Those two people really caused him a lot of trouble. Be it the 5 pinnacle swords or the luminous energy spirit sword, he wasn't picky at all. Just as Zhong Shou was filled with endless grievances, in an unknown world and space-time location, a voice rang out. A white-robed teen was sitting in front of a chessboard. Black and white chess pieces filled the chessboard, which had 19 intersecting lines. However, opposite him, there was no opponent, only a giant deep pool. However, each time the teen placed a piece, there would be a weird power that would appear in the deep pool, controlling the white chess pieces to land on the chessboard. If someone who understood the chess path was here, they would notice it. The gap between the black and white chess pieces had reached a huge level. A huge dragon was just a blink of an eye away from being killed. The black chess pieces had no chance of turning the situation around. However, the white-robed teen was still giggling like he didn't care about winning or losing, playing happily. A moment later, as expected, a full 20 black chess pieces were all sucked out by the weird power in the lake and tossed to the side. The white-robed teen didn't care at all, still playing out a word with a firm and unyielding aura. On the contrary, a cold laugh spread out from within the pool. There are many people in the human race who don't know how to play chess. However, it is rare to see someone like you who is bad at chess but who is so good at it. The outcome of this match is obvious, so what is the point of you not admitting defeat? The voice sounded like a female voice, but it had a metallic quality to it. However, it sounded really nice to the ears. The white-robed teen's ears perked up, revealing a look of enjoyment. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Although my chess position is showing signs of defeat, if I don't continue to play and finish the game, how can I know if there will be a chance of survival later on, and if I can turn defeat into victory? Why won't you admit defeat no matter what?" Chapter 194. Until the very end, it isn't considered over and you don't know the final outcome. You are the same as your master, even if you know you will lose. Even if you pester them, you still want to fight them. Within the pond, there was a burst of laughter. However, it was still a white chess piece that was placed on the chessboard. The voice turned lazy, however. What was the final outcome? He was surrounded and killed by the Confucian saints and many Buddhist and Taoist faction experts. Even after he died, he wasn't able to rest in peace. His body was split into dozens of pieces and suppressed in the 5 continents and 12 islands. What a tragic outcome. A person who was about to step onto the peak of the worlds, who should have been undying and indestructible, ended up in such a state. It really makes one speechless. Your words aren't right. That teen shook his head. His expression was really serious. Master is different from me. He knew that he would definitely win, which was why he kept on fighting with the heavens, the earth, and people. That was because he knew that Art Song Xingdao people's ideals of equality would spread to the world one day. It might not be in his generation. It might not be in my generation or the next, but there will definitely be a day when his wish is fulfilled. That female voice laughed coldly. Instantly the entire pond froze up. You make it sound so easy, but your aura is really solemn and tragic. However, do you think that the Confucian school of thought people are made of mud and will be broken by you? Those Confucian saints were all born from the righteous energy of heaven and earth, holding on to the luck of heaven and earth. Since they are scolding Yurtsang Xingdao for being evil, then they naturally have their reasons. I feel that all of you are in a precarious situation right now. I don't see any chance to rise up. TSK. Senior is wrong again. My master is one of the Confucian saints. Even before he died, his righteous energy was the top of all the saints. The white-robed teen specially adjusted the Confucian crown on his head, like he was reminding her that he was dressed like a Confucian scholar. Master once mentioned before, what is Confucianism? The word Confucianism refers to the needs of people. This is why the so-called Confucianism, simply put, is what people need. The current Confucian school of thought is suitable for the human path of the various world. Naturally, their luck is really thick. However, if one day the people of the world aren't willing to bother about their theories, when the human path changes, then the so-called Confucian school of thought are just fake Confucians. Why can't they win? However, how do you know that there will be a day when the human path? I don't know. The white-robed young man lowered his head and muttered to himself. It seemed that he had finally made up his mind and made another move on the chessboard. Those fellows take the responsibility to fool the people. What can be made of the people can't know. The Confucian school of the Confucian school, of course, they have spent so much effort. They spread of Confucian Confucians Confucian TTS, TT have. Since you don't know, how do you know you have a chance of winning? The voice in the pool that had already turned into ice was even colder. TTTTTTTSS of the TTTTTSS, no matter how much he tried to confine them, no matter how much he tried to fool them, what was the point? Those people go against the will. How can they not walk further and further away from the human path? The 10 over dynasties in the central cloud continent usually end in just a few hundred years. The Confucian school of thoughts would flourish once every few hundred years, a cycle of death every few hundred years, never changing. Who knows how many people in the 5 continents and 12 islands died because of this war? They won't repent. They are talking about these heaven path bugs. As he said that, the white-robed teen's expression seemed to be getting more and more furious. Our Confucian school of thought's 6 arts, rites, music, archery, driving, calligraphy, and divination. The ancient saints were either martial path experts or peak spirit masters. In the end, they changed it to the 6 scriptures. It caused the Confucians today to have no strength to fight a chicken, relying on righteousness to eat. Their lives and deaths are in the hands of the ruler, becoming dogs of the ruler. How can they rule? And that so-called doctrine of the mean? It's all bullshit. He ripped open his collar. The ancient saints, the so-called middle path, was the path of heaven and man merging into one. It focused on one's nature and one's body merging, cultivating the heart and character to reach the highest level of kindness, benevolence, sincerity, virtue, and holiness. However, they made it sound like it was neutral, a compromise between the two. What ruling a country is like cooking a small fish. How can this country be compared to a small fish? Even if one wanted to cook some small fish, it was okay to use some strength occasionally. Like them, even if their bodies were rotting and leaking pus, they didn't dare to use a knife to cut themselves. What was the point? In the past, when I did things, people who went slightly out of line were seen as cruel officials. They had to scold and scold them before they were willing to stop. Also, what do you mean that if the water is too clear there won't be any fish? Then why should the water be clear? The Confucian school of thought ruled the world. Every 100 years, corruption would rise and chaos would appear. However, those Confucian school of thought were helpless. They even came to scold my master, saying that it was a heretical path. Them. Within the pond it was totally silent. Like they were totally stunned by the last sentence of the teen. The white-robed teen smiled. "We are playing chess. Why are you saying all this? It is rare for me to come over to accompany you. All these things have nothing to do with you." After a long while, the voice in the pool let out a soft snort and replied. When the white-robed teen saw that, he was startled. A moment later, he smiled. "As expected, if we don't continue to fight, how would we know whether we win or lose in the end? If I admitted defeat just now, how would I know that you would be so careless and reveal such a huge weakness? Even I, this stupid chess player, saw a chance to turn defeat into victory." Within the pond, it was totally silent. However, just as the teen was holding a black chess piece in his hand, his heart suddenly moved. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat as he casually waved his hand outwards. A few 100 miles away, a talisman flew over. The white-robed teen was startled as he summoned it into his hand. A moment later, his brows furrowed. He was both surprised and worried. "Is the person who sent the talisman your junior who got the Marshal Saint golden pellet?" The voice within the pond seemed to have confirmed that this was the case. Not waiting for the teen to reply, she asked curiously, "What is it that caused your heart to shake so much?" The teen didn't reply, thinking about it for a long while before he clenched his hand. The talisman in his hand instantly turned to dust and scattered. He said with a tearful face, "It is Lingbo. She recently found a good seedling. 14 years old, sword path 1 with the spirit, Xiantian initial meridian, night wandering spirit master." Just that? The female voice didn't understand. To have such achievements at such a young age. In front of her, it was like he wasn't worth mentioning. Dual cultivator, to have such achievements at 14 years old, that can only be considered not bad. However, sword path 1 with the spirit, this kid is indeed the first since the sky was opened. However, it shouldn't be enough to alarm Yu Tsang Xingdao. Let the current sect leader of Taiyuan sect come out and take him in as a direct disciple. After all, you aren't in the cloud world anymore. The white-robed teen sighed, feeling really helpless. However, what if this person was born with dual meridian body? Barriers from heaven and his soul is broken? Within the pond, there was a shocked exclamation, looking really shocked. On the surface of the water, a snow-white dragon head appeared. Although it was huge, its appearance was inexplicably adorable. It opened its eyes wide and looked at the chessboard in shock. In this world, there is actually such a person? To cultivate to such a realm and still not die, how weird. If he is a God-Emperor candidate, his luck shouldn't be so bad. A few cultivation barriers gathered together. However, if one were to say that he wasn't, then this kind of talent was truly rare and unprecedented. It is enough for him to inherit Yortsang Xingdao's legacy. Haven't you been worrying about the legacy? This should be a happy matter, so why are you so troubled? Oh right, I remember that I owe you a favor. You and I have known each other for many years, as long as it is within my ability. This time, I can lend you a helping hand. That white-robed teen wasn't happy at all, shaking his head slightly. With such a disciple, I am naturally delighted. However, the Kenzo sect already knows about this person. Lingbo and Wuju of Villa Xianfan have been arguing for several months to no avail before reporting it to me. Do you think I don't have a headache? However, if you are willing to help me, this matter will be easily solved. Kenzo sect? You want to come into contact with that Kenzo sect head? Then forget it, I want to sleep. The jade dragon rolled its eyes, then decisively dove back into the water, bubbling with water. The white-robed teen scoffed, not caring much, shaking his head slightly. As expected, you are unreliable. It seems like I really have to make a trip back to the cloud world. Speaking of that place, I have left for 4,000 years, I really miss it. Following which he looked at the chessboard in front of him regretfully. However, I can't play this game. It is really rare for me to win against you. With your chess skills, even if I make a mistake, you aren't my match. At the end of this game, I should win by 6 points. The female voice scoffed, filled with disdain. Following which she shot a ball of white light towards the white-robed teen. Take this thing, anyways it is useless with me. Although your martial path and spiritual cultivation have entered the saint realm. Once you enter the cloud world, you will be suppressed. With this item here, it can help you a little. Anyways, be careful, don't end up like your master, being ganged up on and killed by others. The white-robed teen smiled, not bothering to look at what the white light was, casually keeping it into his sleeve. His eyes were filled with gratitude as he nodded his head towards the pond. Following which he didn't stop, stepping into the void. Just as the teen's body disappeared, that jade-white dragon head popped out once more. Its entire body pierced out of the water, only to see numerous red chains that were densely packed together, piercing through and binding the entire dragon body. At this moment, the dragon eyes were looking at the chessboard in shock. Weird, why would my piece be placed here? Chapter 195. Xian Mountain City, within a quiet room. 2 candles flickered, seeming to feel the cold and solemn aura of this place. The flames shrunk and were about to be extinguished. Lysina sat on a soft couch, her face dark and sunken, filled with coldness. Opposite her knelt a person, it was Li Yunyang. She was kneeling on the ground, her face ashen white. What is going on with my son-in-law? You still aren't willing to say? Following beside Miss, you can't not know anything. If you aren't willing to answer me today, then there is no need to speak. Li Yunyang bit her lips, threads of blood seeping out. After a short while, seeing the glow in Lysina's eyes become sharper and sharper, she hesitantly opened her mouth. Yunyang really doesn't know. I only know that someone placed restrictions in my body. He also warned me that if I dared to reveal anything about the Zhongshu prince, he would wipe out my 3 families. Even the spiritual houses and sects had to be destroyed. I don't know whether or not it is true, but I guess that this person is at least above the ascended realm. Lysina was startled, revealing a deep thought. Following which she laughed coldly. If that is the case, then I don't blame you. However, why did you instigate me to pretend to be sick? After returning to Xian Mountain City, you thought of all sorts of ways to prevent that Zhongshu from entering the city? Li Yunyang's expression seemed to relax as she sighed. Mistress, Yunyang did it for Mississippi. The prince's sword technique is one with the spirit, and he is a dual cultivator, which is rare in the world. However, the problems of the mysterious moon-wood brilliance method can only be solved by the mysterious cloud spirit sect's mysterious chill ancient pill, which is why Yunyang. As she said that, Li Yunyang snuck glances at Lysina's expression. Seeing her expression slowly calm down, her tone also became more and more relaxed. But to her surprise, before she could finish her words, Lysina suddenly waved her hand and heavily slapped her face. With a loud "pa" sound, Li Yunyang was sent flying several feet away. She covered her face as she looked at the couch in shock. His eyes were filled with bewilderment, as if he did not understand why his mistress would attack him for no reason. Do you really think that I, Lysina, am an ignorant woman? Lysina sneered coldly. The sharpness in her eyes seemed like it was about to materialize. For Iran's sake, I can't believe you can say such words. Only the mysterious chill ancient pill of the mysterious moon would brilliance method could resolve the hidden danger of the mysterious moon would brilliance method and save her life. You can only use that to coax others, but you're using it to deceive me. Lisina stood up and coldly stood in front of Li Yunyang. Even now I'm still angry at my son-in-law. However, he also knew that with his ability and talent, if he wanted to join one of the sects, even those few grotto heaven vast habitats would treat it like a treasure. He was probably afraid that she would melt if he held her in his hands. A small mysterious cloud spirit sect, a Han Nishui, what were they? In the future, once Zhong Shou broke through to the Empyrean realm, if he wanted to, he could crush him with a single finger. Was there a need to worry about not being able to find a single ancient cold profound pill? Be it asking seniors to help or perfecting the cultivation method, or finding other herbs to refine pills, it would be really easy to protect Iran. Do you need to worry about my daughter's life? Li Yunyang's face couldn't help but turn ashen white, devoid of blood. She opened her mouth to speak, but she didn't know how to explain. Lisina seemed to have calmed down, asking expressionlessly, I heard that you had an unclear relationship with a disciple of the mysterious cloud spirit sect? Iran marrying into the mysterious cloud spirit sect seemed to be beneficial to you? Oh right, that person seemed to be called Long something, what an old-fashioned name. However, this person seemed to have disappeared for a long time. Who knows, he might have died at the hands of my son-in-law. Li Yunyang's body instantly felt like it was struck by lightning. His entire person was startled, his eyes filled with disbelief and hatred. Lisina was too lazy to listen to her explanation, saying leisurely, the prince is a Fangzheng. When she said that, Lisina also felt that it didn't make sense. Like Zhong Shou, he had nothing to do with the word Fangzheng. After a light cough, she continued, although he didn't mention you in front of Iran and my husband, he didn't say anything bad about you. However, I can imagine the way you, Li Yunyang, do things. Since Iran wants to marry him, no matter how much I don't like that fellow, I have to help him and Iran clear out some trash. Your family has served me for 10 years, and I am not someone who doesn't care about old relationship. I won't kill you. Have you heard of the Yellow Fountain prison? I will send you there, and 20 years later, I will get people to bring you back. Li Yunyang's eyes were originally unfocused, but when she heard the words Yellow Fountain prison, she couldn't help but show a strong fear. She sat up and was about to beg for mercy when a few chains flew in from outside the room, directly wrapping around her limbs and dragging her out of the room. Just as the room was totally silent, the curtains at the side were pulled open. Xianyuan Tong walked out while deep in thought. Husband, do you think what Li Yunyang said is true? Lisina's eyes were filled with doubt. Does Zhong Shou really have an ascended grandmaster by his side? I took a closer look at her just now, but I didn't notice anything wrong with her. It should be true. Xianyuan Tong stood with his hands behind his back, taking in a deep breath. 2 days ago, 2,000 miles away from Xian Mountain City, Fang Shu's tracks were for no reason. He just disappeared without a trace. There wasn't even any sound. Lisina was astonished, following which her brows rose up. But how did you know? Naturally, I sent some people to kill him, but in the end, they didn't see him. My men searched thousands of miles of land and still couldn't find him. We also didn't see him rush back to Pill Fountain Sect to report. Seeing Lisina's brows furrow, revealing a disapproving expression, Xianyuan Tong couldn't help but laugh. I am just joking. I am just planning to lock him up for a period of time and let him go after everything settles down. However, if he really makes me anxious, even if he is from the same sect as Iran, I will kill him. The sect you came from is one of the large sects in the world, so you should know how much this spirit and martial arts merging into one is worth. The last few sentences were full of a cold and murderous aura. Lisina was startled, spirit and martial arts merging into one. I only know that during the cloud-desolate era, the most outstanding ancient experts were all dual cultivators. People who could merge martial arts and spiritual cultivation into one. However, I heard that most of them were after the celestial realm. I really haven't heard of someone like Zhong Shou. Who knows if this matter is a blessing or a curse to him? The sex fighting over him might not be a blessing. Weiron's kid is naturally talented. He is my son-in-law, so naturally I have to protect him. Xianyuan Tong smiled slightly, following which Li Sina asked curiously, I am only curious about the mysterious ascended realm that Li Yunyang mentioned. If he really likes Zhong Shou, why didn't he take him in? Zhong Shou wants to return to Gantian Mountain to take over as the Monster King, so he will have to kill along the way. There will be a time when people find out about his ability. A few days ago when they charged into the city, did Zhong Shou really attack in front of everyone? How would he be able to hide it? He didn't take him in because he was afraid of breaking the vases or because he had other worries. As for the situation a few days ago, it was because Zhong Shou that kid didn't attack in front of everyone. How do you know that they didn't have a way to hide it after the matter? Xianyuan Tong shook his head. If it was me, I wouldn't be willing to let so many people know about his sword path being one with the spirit, dual cultivator talent. Wouldn't that increase the number of competitors to snatch disciples? If it was a righteous sect, it would be okay as they would have some worries. If it was a demon sect, even if they killed millions of people in Xian Mountain City, they wouldn't care. This is just a small matter and there is no need to care about it. As he said that, Xianyuan Tong's cold and sharp expression became thicker and thicker. What I am most worried about is Yunxia Mountain and Blazing Flame Mountain. Tan Tao, that bastard, was too presumptuous. He actually did such a thing. It was really a headache. These few years I was heavily injured and couldn't manage things. Did you all really think that I was dead? As he said that, Li Sina was also ashamed and awkward. Although she didn't agree to Tan Tao's suggestion that day, she didn't stop him either. Thinking back to those two monster race powers, she felt that it was a little problematic. There was also that West Ocean Taoyuan city. Gantian Mountain's Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang wouldn't sit still and do nothing. It was okay if Zhong Shou didn't go to Gantian Mountain, but if he really rushed over, he would be like a rabbit walking into a tiger's den. Of course, at this moment no one knew. This seemingly harmless rabbit not only knew how to bite people, but it was also a ferocious beast that hid its strength. However, no matter how strong Zhong Shou was, he was only a night-wandering realm spirit master. Compared to these two giants, he was still a kid who hadn't grown up and had no way to go up against them. In the past, she didn't care, but now she couldn't help but feel worried. Since there is an ascended ancestor beside that kid, he should be fine. However, we can't place his safety on outsiders. Zhong Shou needs some trustworthy subordinates in Gantian Mountain. Xianyuan Tong's brows furrowed tightly. I am prepared to lend him half of my mysterious armor Wind Dragon Cavalry to protect him to Gantian Mountain. As for that day, although Zhong Shou didn't mention it, I have to give him an explanation. You are the mastermind behind this matter and it hasn't caused any bad consequences. You are my wife and I can't punish you. However, you need to be grounded for 3 years and not allowed to go out. When my little brother breaks free, I will bring you along to ask for forgiveness. Although Luoxian is loyal, he is rash and offends his superiors. He will be whipped 100 times by the Lord. He will also be grounded for 3 years so that he can cultivate his body and mind. As for Tan Tao, as he said that, Xianyuan Tong suddenly stopped and was in deep thought. A moment later he opened his mouth seriously, removed from his position as Wind Feather Army Marshal, and whipped 200 times. If he doesn't die, he will follow Zhong Shou to Gantian Mountain. My son-in-law just so happens to lack wings. On the side of Li Sina, when she heard the mysterious armor Wind Dragon Cavalry, she was shocked. This was the strongest and most elite cavalry army in Xian Mountain City. Less than 2,000 of them, but they had the battle record of trampling 100,000 elite troops. Even Tan Tao, who was seen as one of the brains, was given to Zhong Shou just like that. When she heard the last few sentences, she felt wronged but didn't dare to retort. Then she calmed down. I accept the punishment. I just want to ask you, are you really going to go all out to get involved in this storm? Xian Yuantong instantly laughed out loud, his eyes filled with decisiveness. That in Dragon Canyon matter, there were people who wanted to work with me. However, I was worried about Zhong Shou's safety, which was why I didn't agree. However, now I don't have any worries. Weiran has done us a huge favor. Even if I die without a burial place, I can't sit still and watch the Gantian mountain he built up fall into the hands of others. Chapter 196. Just as Xian Yuantong was worried about Yunxia and Blazing Flame Mountain, on a desolate yellow path far from Xian Mountain City, there were two groups of people dressed differently facing each other. There weren't many of them, only around 100, but they all looked really strong and majestic. All of them were riding the rare Windrider foals. The iron armor on their bodies were all really exquisite and had talismans carved on it. The people on both sides more or less had beast characteristics. In the middle of the path, there were two people sitting opposite each other. One of them was really muscular like a giant bear. His face was covered in a beard and his eyes were really fierce. The other was medium-sized, but he looked really strong. He was slim and thin, the muscles on his body were just average. He sat there lazily, giving one a feeling that he was really dangerous. His well-proportioned four limbs seemed to contain explosive strength. That prince wants to return to Gantian Mountain. He doesn't dare to leave our Yunxia Mountain territory. He also can't leave your Blazing Flame Mountain's land. A full 400 torches were nailed to the side. Seeing that this place was as bright as day, that thin male lowered his head, holding a tree branch and drawing on the ground. In the blink of an eye, a map of Donglin Cloud Continent appeared on the paper. Then, he held the tree branch in his hand and lightly knocked on a long and narrow mountain range that pretty much covered half of the southwest cloud path. As for outside of the Cloud Ocean, with the West Ocean Taoyuan City locking it down, he also can't go. There was only one path that could be taken, no matter how he thought about it. Ruohai Mountain Range. The burly man squinted his eyes slightly and smiled. This place is really difficult to deal with. There are at least 4 ways in and out of this place. They are also really far away. The nearest one is 1,000 miles away, and there are also tens of thousands of feet tall mountains. Even if they are all cavalry with cloud stepping foals, they would need 3 days to move. To block him isn't an easy matter. If it was just the few people around him, it would be easy. Even my Blazing Flame Mountain can find a few Xuanwu ancestors to help. However, if Xian Yuantong wants to go all out to help him, then we have to send a huge army to block him. However, this region is coincidentally between Gantian Mountain and Xian Mountain City. If we send too few people, we might all die. If we send too many, it will shake the foundations of both our families. Even the Crown Prince would not dare to come. Is there a need to mobilize so many people? It's not because of Zhong Shou. It was just cutting off the connection between Xian Mountain City and Gantian Mountain, breaking their wings. It was even better that Xian Yuantong was willing to send a large army for him. He would have a decisive battle in the Ruohai Mountain Range. If they couldn't, they could build a city here. You and I will each take 2. Within this Ruohai Mountain Range, the 25 mined stone veins that belong to Gantian Mountain and Xian Mountain will all fall into our hand. Didn't Prince Xiongkue come for that? In the past, the 3 of them were looking forward to Zhong Shou's return. However, today this kid had obtained the support of Xian Yuantong. That Iron Tiger's attitude was also unfathomable. Be it Zhong Shi or Zhong Yang, they would definitely feel uneasy. If it was in the past, as long as Gantian Mountain casually sends out an army, we would have no chance at all. Only now do we have a chance. The skinny man snorted coldly. Don't try to sound me out like this. Most of the bear clans are honest and straightforward, but your Flame Bear clan is as cunning as a fox. Be straightforward, I won't take advantage of you. However, this Ruahai mountain range is a little far from my Yunxia mountain. At most, we can send 450,000 elites and 7 Xuanwu ancestors. How about your Blazing Flame Mountain 600,000? For exits have 200,000 and above troops, enough to fight with Xian Mountain City. That's for the best. That Xiong Kuei didn't reject, nodding his head in agreement. However, his eyes revealed a probing expression. However, Brother Feng, is your Yunxia Mountain really prepared to kill that Gantian Mountain Prince? The thin male's brows furrowed, scoffing coldly. Why? What does killing this Zhong Shi benefit me? It will only benefit those 3 people. To be able to capture him alive and have one more trump card in our hands is the best. If we really can't, then killing him is okay. For this matter, both our families will rely on our own ability. Xiong Kuei laughed out loud, following which he took a tree branch and pointed at the map. Then this matter is settled. However, before the army gathers, I want to take a look at this place. I wonder if Brother Feng would be interested in making a trip with me? This place is Jiefu City? Feng Yu's brows instantly furrowed as he looked towards where Xiong Kuei's eyes were pointing at, his eyes filled with deep thought. It is. Xiong Kuei nodded slightly. To enter Ruahai mountain range from the east, no matter which path it is, we have to pass through this city. This place is the 3rd biggest cultivator market in Donglin Cloud Continent. I heard that recently Pill Fountain Sect and Kongqi Sect both have a batch of spiritual artifacts and pills to sell here. It is really bustling. I guess that Gantian Mountain Prince will most probably go take a look. No matter what, I have to join in the fun. I also want to see what ability that prince has. Let Xianyuan Tong nod his head and really marry his daughter to that trash. Feng Yu thought about it for a moment before nodding his head slightly. Their Yunxia Mountain also needed to buy some high-grade spiritual treasures, so it was good to go take a look. Xianyuan Iran's pill refining speed was really quick, refining day and night. The few Grade 2 and Grade 3 pills that Zhong Shi needed were refined in just a short few days. Zhong Shi went to visit her every day, morning, afternoon and night without stopping. He personally saw his kind and righteous little girl slowly become tired and haggard. He couldn't help but feel heart-pained. He wanted to help, but every day he was chased out of the pill room by Iran because she found him an eyesore. Zhong Shi was helpless and could only vent all his rage on Zhong Yuan. He also trained him from morning to night without stopping. There were 24 hours in a day and Zhong Yuan could only rest for an hour. Seeing that, Hu Zhongyuan's head felt numb. Every day he would avoid him from afar. When he looked at Zhong Shi, he would instinctively hide in a corner. He was afraid that this prince who obviously had sadistic tendencies would think of him and viciously train him. However, when 5 to 6 days passed, Hu Zhongyuan felt envious. Zhong Yuan's days were a little tough. However, his improvement speed was terrifying. Since he broke through to the martial ancestor realm, it was like a flood bursting out of a dam, unstoppable. Using the power of pills, in just 10 days he was able to cultivate his 4th Earth Meridian. In just half a month, he would be able to merge with another spiritual meridian and truly enter the 4th Meridian realm. On the contrary, he was stuck at a standstill during these days. He had touched the barrier to advancing to Xuanwu Ancestor, but he couldn't find a way to break through. Looking at the situation, without 4 to 5 years of settling down, he wouldn't be able to improve further. Envious of Zhong Yuan's improvement, Hu Zhongyuan instantly changed his strategy. From morning till night, he would be in front of Zhong Shou. He would also shake his head and wave his hands. He was just short of telling Zhong Shou that he was here and that he should pay attention to him. "Come on, Your Highness, come and torture me." Zhong Shou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't have time to bother about this fellow, so he could only casually point out some flaws in Hu Zhongyuan's knife attacks and follow his promise from before. He personally taught him a set of knife techniques from the tiger race that he remembered, which surprised Hu Zhongyuan. However, while he was delighted, Hu Zhongyuan felt unhappy. He thought that, as expected, looks were more popular. This Zhong Yuan had white skin and a handsome face. Could it be that she had an affair with the crown prince? If not, why did the prince like to torture him and not find him? Tens of days later, the last cooling snow quail pill on Zhong Shou's pill recipe was finally out. The current Xianyuan Iran was totally exhausted, making Zhong Shoxin feel guilty apart from the pain. In the last 2 days in Xian Mountain City, he didn't leave her side at all, accompanying her. On the 15th day since they arrived in Xian Mountain City, Zhong Shou thought about his agreement with Hu Zhongyuan. There were only 20 days left. Just now, she had reluctantly started to leave. The bunch of them were accompanied out of the city by Xianyuan Iran. However, just as they walked out of the city gates, they saw a black mass of cavalry lined up neatly by the side of the road. They were all dressed in black talisman armor, along with a 4-foot-long knife, a steel spear, and a red bow. The mounts below were also really weird. Some looked like lizards, but they were different. Not only were their bodies beautiful, their 4 legs were slightly long, their outer appearance was pale green, and there were 2 wings that seemed to have degenerated. They could also float in the air, stepping on the air a foot above the ground. This is the wind-winged dragon beast? Xian Mountain City's mysterious armor-winged dragon cavalry? Zhong Shou's pupils constricted. The wind-winged dragon beast was also a grade 3 beast. Its speed was a little faster than the cloud-stepping foals, but it was a little weaker than the windrider foals. However, the leather armor on the beast was tough to be broken by blades, and it was really strong, more suitable for battle formations. Their speed was a little slower, but their numbers were numerous times more than the windrider foals. The mysterious armor-winged dragon cavalry of Xian Mountain City was an elite cavalry army that was famous throughout Donglin Cloud Continent. In terms of ranking, they were even above the Yunxia City Fire Wolf cavalry. The only ones that could suppress them were his father Zhong Weiran's personal Black Fox Iron Cavalry. It was said that the cavalry within were all people who cultivated both spirit and martial arts. There were only 1,000 of them, but they were invincible. Even those hidden sects had to fear their sharpness. However, after Zhong Weiran hid into the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, this Black Fox Iron Cavalry disappeared without a trace. During the time he was in the east of Donglin Cloud Continent, especially after he left Pill Spirit Mountain, the reason why those powers only sent small fries over to probe was because they were worried about this personal army of the Monster King. Casually looking at these cavalry, he saw that there were tens of Xiantian masters. There were also 10 martial ancestors, each leading 10 groups of 100 people. Although they were all strong, they weren't arrogant at all. They stood solemnly at the side of the path, as silent as a forest, without any signs of movement at all. However, there was a strong aura, suppressing one such that one couldn't breathe. Probably with just 1,000 cavalry, they would be able to trample over Cloud Saint City and Lianhai City. He was startled for a moment before he understood Xianyuan Tong's intentions. While he was grateful in his heart, he scolded out. He was originally planning to spend some time with Iran before he left. However, looking at the situation now, it was all gone. Riding the horse in front of the cavalry, he saw Xianyuan Tong smile. "Your mother-in-law still doesn't want to see you. She is really arrogant and has always been like that. She can't bring her face down, so don't blame her." Zhong Shou nodded his head and bowed, not showing any expression. Xian Yuan Tong looked behind him. This is the personal army that I spent tens of years to train. From now on, I'll leave it to you. These people have followed me for more than 10 years, you can be at ease. Chapter 197. Zhong Shou nodded his head silently. 1,000 mysterious armor-winged dragon cavalry, that was a huge amount. He wasn't willing to open his mouth to thank him, only remembering the gratitude in his heart. Naturally, in this world, there isn't absolute loyalty. So Prince, don't disappoint him. As he said that, Xian Yuan Tong waved his hand. Out of the cavalry, the person at the front rode the most majestic wind-winged dragon beast to the side of Xian Yuan Tong. When he opened his helmet, it was Tan Tao, nodding his head towards Zhong Shou. Zhong Hu and Zhong Shou beside you are top people in the martial cultivation world who can take on 10. However, if they face Xuanwu ancestors, they will still be at a disadvantage. As for Ruoshui, although he personally taught her and treated her like a disciple, her poison injuries haven't healed. I'll let Tan Tao follow you. He was the one who caused the Yunxia and Blazing Flame Mountain matters. This time, let him make up for it. As Xian Yuan Tong said that, he seemed to still be angry, viciously staring at Tan Tao. The latter could only smile awkwardly, following which his expression turned solemn. Don't worry, City Lord, on this trip to Gantian Mountain, I won't let the prince die in front of me. Only then did Xian Yuan Tong smile in satisfaction. Zhong Shou felt his head hurt. Why was it this scheming fellow? He would rather Xian Yuan Tong send Luo Xian to his side. However, at this moment, he couldn't reject and could only helplessly say, "Thank you, father-in-law, these 1,000 mysterious armor-winged dragon cavalry. In just 3 months, I, Zhong Shou, will let them return in one piece." "No need, you are the young city lord of Xian Mountain City. These mysterious armor-winged dragon cavalry should be yours in the future, you can use them as you wish. Naturally, this bunch of people will be taken care of by you." Zhong Shou's mouth was agape. Xian Yuan Tong laughed. "I know that when your father hid in the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, he left large amounts of beast crystals and mined stones for you in the Sanlu Bank. You can afford such a small number of people, right?" Zhong Shou was speechless. What did he mean by such a small number of people? 10 martial ancestors, 50 Xiantian masters, and 200 mythic masters. The others were all above the 5 meridians of the Earth chakra level. There was also 1 man and 3 horses, making a total of 3,000 wind-winged dragon beasts. This person ate the horse's food and was also provided with a salary. Without more than 400 grade 4 spirit stones or 4,000 grade 4 beast crystals a year, it was impossible to supply them. Amongst which, the few martial ancestors took up half. Every year, the spiritual stones and pills provided to them took up around 2,000 grade 4 beast crystals. However, how many grade 4 beast crystals and mined stones did Gantian Mountain produce in a year? There were quite a few spirit stone mines, but most of them had to be divided among the hidden sections. He remembered that Gantian Mountain's annual income, all the money, taxes, mined stones and beast crystals, as well as the tributes from the vassal cities, along with the pills and weapons he ran, as well as the various material transactions, when converted to grade 4 beast crystals, it was only around 30,000. Every year, he obtained quite a lot from hunting under the Cloud Ocean. It should be around 250,000 pieces. In other words, just supplying these 1,000 mysterious armor-wind dragon cavalry was around 180% of Gantian Mountain's annual income. Even if he went back and inherited the position of Monster King, this sum of money wasn't something he could use as he wished. Now, he could only hope that Zhong Weiran left him a huge fortune. Xian Yuan Tong seemed to have seen through his thoughts, smiling slightly. "Don't worry. Don't forget that Brother Weiran was already an ascended ancestor 6 years ago. Moreover, He was an ascended expert who could charge into the cloud ocean alone to hunt grade 7 beasts and monsters without any injuries. Just him alone could obtain 10 and above grade 7 beast crystals each year. These few years, he went to those famous dangerous lands every day to train his martial path. You can imagine how huge his wealth is now. The money he saved up these few years would be enough to buy my Xian mountain city. Samuraim's eyes instantly constricted, his heart instantly at ease. Only in his heart, there were waves rising and falling. In this era, on the Cloud Continent, beasts that reached grade 4 and above were really rare. Even if there were, they would be in groups or living in extremely dangerous desolate land. Most of them were like little Ji who had their own intelligence opened. It wasn't something a normal Xiantian master could hunt alone. This was why the price difference between grade 4 and grade 3 was close to 100 times. However, there weren't any above the Cloud Continent. Below the Cloud Continent, there were numerous demon abyss evil lands where numerous beasts and evil monsters lived. If one had enough strength, one could take a floating cloud ship down to hunt. However, this was basically risking one's life and was extremely dangerous. Even ascended ancestors and day-wandering spirit masters might not be able to keep their lives. It was said that many beasts that were chased out of the Cloud Continent during the Cloud Desolate era lived below. There were also numerous strong beasts that were infected by the demon energy. Even 10,000 years later, there would be cases of ascended ancestors or day-wandering spirit masters being surrounded and killed every year. This was why, apart from those hidden sects, only powers like Gantian Mountain had the ability to form fleets to hunt for beast crystals. This was also why numerous martial ancestors and Xiantian masters relied on Gantian Mountain and Xian Mountain City. Apart from half of the beast crystals they obtained from the demon abyss evil lands, they would hand over to the city lord. As for the other gains, including the fur materials, they could keep it for themselves. Gantian Mountain's tax each year wasn't much. A large portion of their wealth came from below the cloud ocean. As there were very few casualties each time they entered, they were able to dominate the west of Donglin Cloud Continent. However, he guessed that Zhong Weiran was really strong. But to be so strong to such an extent, it made one speechless. Going in and out of the cloud ocean alone to hunt grade 7 beasts without being injured at all. Even a grade 1 grandmaster might not be able to do that. Based on what Xianyuan Tong said, Zhong Weiran hid it for a full 6 years. Which meant that during these 6 years, when he was killing beasts and monsters below, those sect experts didn't notice at all. Following which Zhong Shou started to calculate in his heart how much wealth Zhong Weiran left for him. One grade 7 beast crystal was equivalent to 10,000 grade 4 beast crystals. 10 a year, 6 years was 600,000 grade 4 beast crystals. Wasn't that the same as 2 years of income of Gantian Mountain? Even Zhong Weiran himself needed to use a lot. Above the ascended realm, the pills and mind stones needed were all ocean amount. However, the remaining number was probably so huge that it was beyond his imagination. Taking in a deep breath, Zhong Shou forced himself to calm down. His head was covered in cold sweat. That's right. He remembered that a few days later would be the first wave of beast crystal and mind stone prices falling. The drop this time wasn't small. He actually forgot about it. In the past, he thought that the amount of mind stones and beast crystals he had in Sanlu Bank wasn't too large, and he didn't care much about it. He was confident that even if he lost it, he could earn it back quickly. At this moment, he felt heartache. All of a sudden, he recalled that there seemed to be a floating ruined city near the eastern entrance of the Ruahai mountain range. It was a famous cultivator market. Numerous cultivators and spirit masters, as well as various powers, even hidden sects all traded there. That Sanlu Bank definitely had a branch within, and it was along the way. Xianyuan Tong Zhong Shou's face was alternating between green and white, his expression fluctuating as he found it weird. following which he thought that Zhong Shou was shocked by the huge wealth, breaking out into a laugh. As for how much money Weiren left behind, I don't know. However, thinking about it, it shouldn't be little. It should be enough for my 1,000 mysterious armor-winged dragon cavalry for 3 to 5 years. Don't worry. Oh right, Zhong Shou, do you know about spirit and martial arts merging into one? This question came out of nowhere. Tan Tao and Hu Qianqiu's pupils constricted. Then, they returned to normal. Spirit and martial arts merging into one? Zhong Shou's brows rose up slightly. This was a term that was seen as extremely high in both the spirit and martial path. How would he not know about it? Only he felt a little weird. Why did Xianyuan Tong ask about this for no reason? I heard about it before. However, it seems like only those above the celestial realm in both the spirit and martial paths can do it. Although there are some people below the celestial realm who can do it, there are very few of them. It was said that after the Cloud Desolate era, there were only 7 people. Out of these 7 people, the most famous one was the Kenzo sect leader, as well as Tsang Shengdao's current revered one. Moreover, all of them stepped into the celestial sect in a short time and left the cloud world. They were all ridiculously strong people. Spirit masters and martial cultivators could be split into heaven, earth, and body levels. After the spiritual grandmaster and true image spirit master, it wasn't the end. As expected, it was only done unconsciously after being drunk, Xianyuan Tong muttered, his face filled with regret. Only when Zhong Shou looked over with a weird expression did he smile. You are also a dual cultivator. Have you never thought about merging the spirit and martial paths into one? When Zhong Shou heard that, he decisively shook his head. Why haven't I thought about it? However, I heard that spirit and martial arts merging into one relies on comprehension, inspiration, and luck. If we force it, we won't be able to. Xianyuan Tong nodded his head slightly and didn't think too much about it. He clapped his hands and saw a cloud-crossing carriage drive out from behind the cavalry. Zhong Shou felt weird, taking a look within only to see that it was filled with jars of wine. He couldn't help but feel weird. Xianyuan Tong should know that he couldn't drink wine? He only heard Xianyuan Tong explain, "This is the wine vault that I have accumulated over these tens of years. Today I will give it all to you. In the future, every time you train it is best if you can drink a bottle. It is beneficial for you. If you meet a strong enemy, it is best if you can drink until you are half drunk." Zhong Shou was instantly speechless. Drinking wine was beneficial for him to train in martial arts. Why didn't he know? In terms of martial arts experience, this father-in-law of his couldn't even compare to him. However, he still reluctantly accepted it. Just as Zhong Shou was about to turn around and walk back to the cloud-crossing carriage, he pretended to ask, "Oh right, recently I heard Hu Zhongyuan mention that these 2 years the beast crystals hunted by Gantian Mountain has doubled. The beast crystals circulating on the market are much more than last year. Is it the same for father-in-law?" If that is the case, I am planning to make a trip to Jiefu City to change all the beast crystals that father left. I don't know why, but I am a little worried. Xianyuan Tong didn't care at first, but when he heard the last few words, his pupils constricted. Chapter 198. When they left Xian Mountain City, the people following Zhong Shou were 1,000 times stronger. Not only did they have 1,000 more mysterious armor-wind dragon cavalry, but they also had 50 more carriages, 45 of which were the rations of the cavalry, as well as bows and arrows, spare weapons and armor as well as some personal items. They were pulled by the wind-winged dragon beasts and were really quick. Naturally, their decorations and comfort level were far from Zhong Shou's carriage. They were the simplest transport carriages, the cost was 10 times more. There were 5 which were Zhong Shou's. There was only 1 carriage of wine, the other 4 were books. Xian Mountain City also had its own book collection, most of which were martial arts and spells, some of which disappeared in the future. Zhongshou treated them like they were treasures, specially inviting a few spirit masters to use spells to copy them and bring them away. Every time he was free after cultivating, he would take a look at one. They were basically some shallow martial arts and spells. However, he couldn't underestimate them. There were always some interesting parts which could enlighten Zhongshou. Apart from that would be Xian Yuantong's own men, a full 3,000 mysterious armor cavalry, and close to 200 carriages. Although his father-in-law didn't have much ambition, he was a smart and decisive person. Zhongshou just needed a slight reminder, and he didn't hesitate to take out a large half of the beast crystals in the Xian Mountain City storage for Zhongshou to bring away. When they were 30 miles out of the city, Hu Zhongyuan whistled once more, shaking several miles. In just a moment, another group of cavalry swiftly arrived. They were all riding wind-winged dragon beasts, and also brought 100 carriages. There were only 500 of them, all of them muscular, all Iron Tiger race people. Zhongshou now knew the elite troops of Gantian Mountain like the back of his hand. He knew that they were the Iron Tiger halberd warriors of the Iron Tiger race. There were 3,000 of them. However, they weren't cavalry but heavy armored infantry. Usually they rode war horses and could gallop for thousands of miles. Once they formed up, wearing 3 layers of heavy armor and holding halberds, they were pretty much a steel wall with a shredder. 3,000 armored soldiers. Even Zhong Weiron's Black Fox Iron Cavalry didn't dare to charge at them. On the 100 carriages were countless talisman armors and mo sabers made of well-tempered steel. Once there was a battle, it could be equipped immediately. Seeing this bunch of Iron Tiger mo knife warriors, Tan Tao's face instantly turned green. These people hid here without making a sound. It seemed like Hu Qianxiu was most probably defending against Xian Mountain City. However, at this moment it was not good for him to say anything. Together, the thousands of men and horses were actually majestic, galloping like thunder. Hurrying day and night, they arrived at Jiefu City after a day. This city had the word floating in its name, and it was indeed floating in the air. It was actually modified from the remains of a giant ship from the Cloud Desolate era. It had a radius of more than 200,000 feet, and was floating in the air for about 3,000 feet. Zhongshou had never been here before in the game, but he had seen the ruins of this city in real life. He glanced up and didn't care about it at all. Chu Shui was rather surprised. She had never seen such a floating city before. The cloud ocean had the power of maglev, which was why ships only needed to carve a suitable spiritual formation to be able to float on it. However, this giant zhou floating on the cloud continent needed to test the skills of those hidden sections. At this moment, what Zhongshou and Hu Zhongyuan cared more about were the few troops gathered nearby. 2,000 Flame Bear Race Maniac Bear Armored Warriors. 2,000 Yunxia Mountain Tiger Leopard Cavalry. Did the princes of Yunxia Mountain and Blazing Flame Mountain all come here? Hu Zhongyuan squinted his eyes, a cold glow flashing across his eyes. Especially when his eyes swept across those maniac bear armored warriors, his killing intent boiled. The Flame Bear race people also looked over in rage. The Iron Tiger race, Iron Tiger halberd warriors, and these maniac bear armored warriors were all infantry. During these 10 years, who knows how many times they had fought. Naturally, they had many grievances with each other. Actually, there were not only these 2 groups of troops here. There were close to 10,000 soldiers, and one could even see some Skyfox race people. However, what was worth paying attention to were the top elites of Yunxia Mountain and Blazing Flame Mountain. This Jiefu city was shared by the few hidden sects of Donglin Cloud Continent. Although Hu Zhongyuan wanted to borrow the strength of Xian Mountain City to swallow them up, he didn't dare to be arrogant here. He could only snort softly and hide his killing intent. There were so many people here, and they couldn't all head up to Jiefu City. Only Zhong Shou and a few others boarded the ship and boarded the floating city. The moment they stepped in, Hu Zhongyuan was delighted. Yunxia Mountains Fengyu, Blazing Flame Mountains Xiongkue, these two really came. Zhong Shou followed his gaze and looked out, only to see that on the two sides of the wooden corridor, there were groups of people. The one on the left was thin and strong. The King Race Wind Leopard Race people of Yunxia Mountain were mostly of this body type. It should be Yunxia Mountain's Fengyu. As for the muscular man not far away who was 4 times his size, he was most probably Blazing Flame Mountain's Prince Xiongkue. The latter was calm and unruffled, looking over with interest. The former's eyes were cold as he swept the people around Zhong Shou. When he saw Tan Tao, his brows furrowed, and he was about to turn around and leave. However, he stopped his body, his eyes focusing on Zhong Yuan, laughing coldly. "You actually broke through to the martial ancestor realm, what good luck. I thought that you would only be a peak Xiantian in your life." When Zhong Shou heard that, he felt really happy. This was the first time he didn't become the target of mockery. How rare. Zhong Yuan's face instantly turned ashen white. "Last time you were lucky to escape. I heard that you spent many months recovering. Who knows if you are fully healed? Hey, next time on the battlefield you won't have such luck. I'll take your head. My room just so happens to be lacking a chamber pot. Even if you kneel down and beg like last time, it is useless." As Fengyu said that, he was deep in thought. "I heard that a few days ago you accompanied your prince to cause a huge ruckus in Xian Mountain City? Does this mean that you've already changed your allegiance? In the past, I thought that you didn't have much ability, but at least you were smart. Now it seems like you are just a fool. The Sky Fox race's youngest genius, he." After he finished, he coldly looked at Zhong Shou. After a violent intent flashed in his eyes, he waved his sleeves and left. When that person left, Xiongkue smiled towards Zhong Yuan. "I didn't expect that you would really kneel in that battle. I am not as perverted as Fengyu. If you can kneel down and beg for mercy, I will spare your life." Zhong Shou was shocked. Kneel down and beg for mercy? What was going on? Looking at Hu Zhongyuan beside him, the latter instantly understood, explaining softly in his ear, "They are old enemies. The 3 of them are about the same age and are all geniuses who rose up at the same time. They have fought several times on the battlefield and are known as the 3 rising talents of the monster race in the west of the Donglin continent. Before Xiantian, they were all neck and neck. After Xiantian, Zhong Yuan was left behind. 2 years ago in the battle, Zhong Yuan was hit by Feng Yu's huge sword until he knelt on the ground and couldn't stand up. Although he didn't beg for mercy, if it wasn't for the ruler sending people to save him, he would have died. Because of that, his reputation fell and he was overtaken by Zhong Shi. Zhong Shou acknowledged, thinking to himself that the 3 of them actually had such grievances between them. No wonder Zhong Yuan's spear strength had so many weaknesses. Although Hu Zhongyuan's voice was soft, Zhong Yuan could still hear some of it. His body was already trembling slightly, as if he was extremely angry. At this moment, his face was flushed red and his eyes were bloodshot. His fists were tightly clenched. He only felt an indescribable sense of shame, wishing that he could pull out his spear and have a vicious battle with the 2 of them. Suddenly, he felt that not far away, there was a cold gaze looking over. Zhong Yuan's brows furrowed as he looked back, only to see that the person opposite him had a pair of Sky Fox ears, looking really familiar. However, at this moment, this person's eyes, which should have been warm and gentle, were filled with cold rage and hatred. Zhong Yuan only felt his chest thud, his heart sinking to the bottom of the valley, like it was soaked in ice water, feeling cold. Zhong Shou was too lazy to care about his feelings, directly finding the branch of the Sanlu Bank in the city. The so-called Sanlu Bank was also opened by a hidden sect. Speaking of which, it had something to do with Lei Dong. Behind this bank were the few sects under the Kenzo sect. Wujua Villa was within. As their business was only in the central, Donglin, and Nanfeng Cloud continents, which was why it was called the Sanlu Bank. Only this place had verified Zhong Shou's bloodline and was strong. Only then would he not leave behind such a huge fortune that others would be tempted by it and try to snatch it. This bank had really tight defensive methods. Even if one kidnapped or killed Zhong Shou, they wouldn't be able to get a single mind stone. Which was why on this journey, no one had any thoughts about this fortune. When Zhong Shou finally obtained the list of all the items that Zhong Weiran left behind, he couldn't help but take in a deep cold breath. There weren't many beast crystals and mind stones here, only 10,000 grade 3 and grade 4 beast crystals and mind stones. It was similar to the number that Yin Yang told him. However, this should only be the pocket money that Zhong Weiran gave him. On this list, the most eye-catching thing should be the line of words at the top. A total of 57 grade 7 beast crystals, 40 grade 7 soul stones, 19 grade 6 mind stones. There were also 20-odd spiritual artifacts, which were probably grade 5 and above, spiritual weapons and armor. As for pills, there were also hundreds of bottles. However, Zhong Weiran probably didn't think that he could cultivate, which was why he left behind pills that spirit masters needed. From the spirit cultivation realm to the day-wandering realm, it was all there. Damn! Young master, my eyes must have gone bad. 57 grade 7 beast crystals, 40 grade 7 soul stones, it's actually so many times? Isn't this several times higher than our Gantian mountain income? Hu Zhongyuan looked on from the side, his eyes filled with dizziness. I'm a little dizzy, I can't take it. Why is the ruler so rich? Zhongyuan's eyes also widened. If it wasn't for him knowing that these things wouldn't fall into his hands, and that he wasn't Zhong Shou's opponent, he would have thoughts of killing him to steal the treasures. Zhong Shou suppressed his emotions, hiding his trembling hands into his sleeves. Then, he glanced at Hu Zhongyuan in disdain. This fellow really couldn't be used. For such a small amount of money, he made a huge fuss. He really didn't have the aura of an expert. Chapter 199. Actually, the Iron Tiger race couldn't be considered poor. When one reached the Xuanwu ancestor level, when one hunted in the Cloud Ocean, not only did they not need to hand over beast crystals, but they also needed to take offerings from Gantian Mountain. Apart from that Tai Qianxiu, within the Iron Tiger race there were several 7 meridians of the Earth Chakra level. Their income was also huge, at least 40,000 grade 4 beast crystals a year. Hu Zhongyuan as the Iron Tiger race leader, and also a martial ancestor expert, even if he couldn't be compared to him, he should have at least 2,000 grade 4 beast crystals. Making such a big fuss was probably mostly an act. Zhong Shou thought about it seriously. He first took out a purple long spear from the bank, a tight-fitting soft armor and a few useful spiritual artifacts. Apart from that, he also added a stack of top-grade true spiritual talisman papers as well as pills and soul stones. Zhong Weiran had spent a lot of effort for his son. There were many miscellaneous items in the bank and most of them belonged to spirit masters. It could be said that there was everything that one could wish for. There were even tens of precious spirit master cultivation methods as well as talisman books, making Zhong Shou surprised. Coming out from the Sanlu Bank, Zhong Shou headed straight for the trading area of Jiefu City. In the central hall of this cloud-desolate airship, there was a full 50,000 feet of space. There were 2 spirit tools that were specially made here. There were spirit masters at the side presiding over them, forming an enormous light screen. People who came to trade didn't need to set up stalls or search around. All they had to do was let the spirit master cast a spell to form a string of words on the screen. It was extremely convenient. Only some really precious items would be auctioned off separately. However, on the screen, there were some words notifying them. However, Zhong Shou stood in front of one of the screens and hesitated. When the spiritual wave arrived wave after wave, it wasn't only beast crystals and mind stones that were dropping. The other fur materials and various spiritual herbs were also dropping. Even the gold and silver that people of the Cloud Continent used fell a little. What was it called in the future? Inflation? That didn't seem right. Anyways, with the increase in resources, beast crystals and mind stones, the items that could be exchanged for were shrinking. However, most of these were items that normal people used. For example, food, metal ores, and other resources. Between each other, there would also be intense price fluctuations due to the amount of production. There were only a few hundred types of commonly used goods, and there were also some spirit treasures that were still extremely rare even in the era of the spirit tide. That was why the price had always been stable. It was not difficult to maintain his value, but Zhong Shou was more concerned about earning more money. After he returned, it wouldn't be easy to control such a huge business like Gantian Mountain. How could he not have some background? After pondering for a moment, Zhong Shou already had an idea. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Brother Hu, get someone to help me send out a few notices. I want to buy 250 million Nashi Dawn, 250 million Yuan Quenching Dawn, 450 million Bone Refining Dawn, and 450 million Meditation Dawn. 150 million Profound Nurturing Pills. 150 million Brightening Soul Pills. As long as they're concocted within 20 years, I'll be taking all of them today." Right, there were also weapons and armors. All talisman weapons, grade 2 and below spiritual weapons. I'll buy as many as you have. Hu Zhongyuan was startled. His first thought was that Zhong Shou had gone crazy. 2 days ago, he had personally heard Zhong Shou tell Xianyuan Tong that beast crystals and mind stones might depreciate greatly. Although he didn't agree, he wasn't willing to say much. After all, these were things left by Zhong Weiran, and Zhong Shou could use them however he wanted. Since that Xianyuan city lord also fully supported him, then there might be a chance. However, he didn't expect that Zhong Shou would be so crazy. Even if he wanted to maintain his value, he should have bought other things. Why did he want to buy the most basic grade 1 pills? Like the pills that Zhong Shou mentioned, as long as one had opened up their soul ocean and grasped soul power, they could refine them. As the materials were really common and the production was huge, many powers and hidden sects used them to develop their own alchemists. Although the production was huge, only 80% of them could be used. These pills were either used to train the body, help with breathing, or help with meditation. However, they couldn't increase soul power and true qi, so eating too much of them was useless. In this Donglin Cloud Continent, there were only so many cultivators and spirit masters who had the talent to reach the martial master realm, as well as the second realm of spirit masters. Hence, each year there would be a large number of them hidden in the treasuries of the various powers. After a few decades, the pills would deteriorate and be abandoned. Zhong Weiran only had 10 years of history in Gantian Mountain, but the basic pills stored in the treasuries were close to 100 million. On the market, it was the price of cabbage. It wasn't worth it to sell them, but to store them, one could only wait for them to deteriorate. Was Zhong Shou going to buy these things to rot in his hands? As for the weapons and armors, they were a little better, at least they had a longer shelf life. However, Gantian Mountain's blacksmithing industry was already really developed, so they didn't need to buy them. Even if they bought them, they could only seal them up. At this moment, not only was Hu Zhongyuan shocked, but even Chu Shui and Zhong Yuan were stunned. Tan Tao took in a deep breath, and a moment later he understood. So the prince thinks that in the next few years the spiritual energy will increase, and the number of people who have the ability to break through to martial master will greatly increase? If that's the case, then buying these pills is worth it. The city lord has already ordered that Xian Mountain City and the young city lord will advance and retreat together. We don't have many beast crystals in our storage, just the meridian energy pill and foundation stabilizing pill. Seeing that Hu Zhongyuan still didn't understand and looked over, Chu Shui and Zhong Yuan also had a questioning look on their faces. Tan Tao frowned, but he still explained, as the number of people breaking through to Martial Master increases, the demand for these supporting pills will naturally increase. Beast crystals and mind stones, as well as ingredients and herbs, due to the changes in heaven and earth, will also increase greatly. However, those pills could only be refined by a Tier 1 alchemist. However, in such a short time, how can the various powers develop so many pill refiners? Only then did Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Yuan understand. Pill refiners and blacksmiths were the same, they had to go through a total of 3 grades of alchemists before they could truly grasp the ability to craft pills. To develop a pill refiner, even if the herbs were blocked, it would at least take 5 to 6 years. During this period of time, the lack of pills was enough to cause the price of these basic pills to rise to a shocking level. Chu Shui still didn't understand, not understanding the cause and effect within. Seeing this, Tan Tao shook his head inwardly. He thought to himself that these trusted subordinates of the Crown Prince might have good martial talent, but they were all idiots. Hu Zhongyuan didn't know that Tan Tao had already marked him as an idiot in his heart. After understanding what Zhong Shou meant, that this time they would most likely earn and not lose anything, he happily walked to the side of the light screen to look for the hosting spirit master. Stuffing out a few mind stones, in just a moment, a few lines of words appeared on the light screen. It was roughly that the Gantian Mountain Prince Zhong Shou wanted to purchase 250 million Nashi pills, 250 million energy-containing pills etc., as well as various types of weapons and armor. At this moment, Hu Zhongyuan's eyes rolled. Whether or not they could earn money this time depended on whether or not the production of beast crystals and mind stones increased. Thinking back to these few cloud ocean hunts, the number of beast crystals and soul stones they obtained did indeed increase by a lot. This was especially true for the 1st to 4th stage, where the number of 1st stage cultivators increased exponentially. Speaking of which, the situation wasn't right. A bright glow appeared in Hu Zhongyuan's eyes. Without hesitation, he handed out another mind stone to the spirit master, who was still in shock. On the light screen, a line of words was left. Thinking to himself that the heavens would protect him and let him earn a huge sum. Even if he didn't earn, he couldn't lose out. If my old man finds out that I've squandered all of his pension money, he'll definitely be pissed. When the words were displayed, at the start, no one in the hall noticed. A moment later, there was a buzz. The entire hall was filled with the sounds of discussion. Gantian Mountain Prince, isn't he that trash prince? Is he crazy? 250 million Nashi pills, 250 million energy-containing pills, 250 million energy-tempering pills. What does he want these basic pills for? I have heard of this fellow. I heard that a few days ago, Xian Mountain City Xianyuan Tong made him the young city lord of Xian Mountain City. He is determined to stick his daughter into this pile of cow dung. Why would he do such a stupid thing at such a time? Such a huge amount, adding it all up, wouldn't it cost 400,000 grade 4 mind stones? And that armor and talisman weapon, where did he get so much money? You don't have to worry about that. Look at the last sentence. Sanlu Bank's gold note transactions. This is a gold signboard and can't be faked. Whether or not this kid has the money, just ask the bank. However, buying all these things, does this prince have a problem with his brain? Zhong Shou's lips curled up when he heard that. Although she called him an idiot and a prodigal, many words entered his ears. It made him a little unhappy, but on the whole, his mood was still very good. This feeling of everyone being drunk and him being the only one sober, TSK. The transactions he wanted were all huge amounts. Only those big powers and hidden sects and aristocratic families had the ability to take them up. He guessed that they still hadn't reacted, so he went to the side and found an auction hall that auctioned grade 3 and above items. He actually didn't have the heart to buy things, but he was rich. No matter what he faced, he would randomly bid. He could often accurately guess the bottom line of others. After raising the price to an extremely high level, he would immediately back off, causing everyone in the hall to be furious. Their eyes were spitting fire as they looked at this person who harmed others without benefiting himself. The auctioneer was so happy that he was beaming with joy. However, just an hour later, the auctioneer couldn't be happy anymore. As long as Zhong Shou wanted something, no one dared to compete with him. Everyone knew that this was a dumb rich man who threw out 400,000 grade 4 mind stones to buy basic pills, so no one dared to go against him. It wasn't until the auctioneer wanted to cry but no tears came out that Zhong Shou's brows furrowed slightly, revealing a serious expression. Chapter 200. What is going on? That trash, why is he buying these useless basic pills for? It wasn't just the trading hall that was in an uproar after hearing the news on the screen. Almost all of the merchants that were stationed here were in a mess. Within this Jefu city, in a room close to the main hall, Feng Yu was frowning as he looked below in confusion. No matter how dumb he is, there should be a level. 250 million nashi pills, 250 million essence-containing pills, and also an unlimited purchase of weapons and armor. The people around him won't even try to persuade him. What is that Zhong Shou planning? Could it be that there's some deeper meaning behind this? Hearing Feng Yu mutter to himself, Xiong Kuei smiled. It seems like before Zhong Weiran disappeared, he left a huge sum of money for the prince. That is true. Hundreds of thousands of grade 4 beast crystals, just the amount he took out today. It is pretty much the same as most of the hidden sects. Feng Yu scoffed coldly. At this time, how would he have the time to bother about such things? No matter how much money the prince had, if it was stored in the Sanlu Bank, they wouldn't be able to take it. With the support of the Kenzo sect and the other large sects, as long as they believed that Zhong Shou was forced or not willing, they could refuse to pay. Even the head of the 10 shrines, Tailing sect, wouldn't dare to offend them, much less them. Stop talking nonsense. What is your blazing flame mountain planning? Same as you, hesitating. Xiong Kuei sighed slightly, walking in front of the window. Who knows what that trash is planning? Our blazing flame mountain also has quite a number of elementary spirit pills. After accumulating over the years, we have around 80 million. Along with the purchases from the subordinate cities, we have a total of 170 million. This chance to sell at a discount is hard to come by. Moreover, even if we don't do this business, other people will. Feng Yu also looked down. He could see that within the 60,000 feet wide trading hall, there were many heads moving about. Numerous people were whispering to one another. Which is why I am too lazy to care about his reason. Maybe that prince really went crazy. Xiong Kuei said as he glanced at Feng Yu, filled with cold disdain. You and I are both smart people. Why do you need to say such things to mislead us? Sell these pills. It is enough for our blazing flame mountain to expand by 200,000 elites to last for 3 years. Aren't you planning this in your heart? As long as you get that Dragon Canyon and occupy a few Gantian Mountain or our blazing flame mountain mine stone veins, no matter if this deal is a profit or loss, it is worth it, right? Feng Yu's eyes narrowed slightly and then he smiled. What a great Xiong Kuei of the blazing flame mountain. Your flame bear bloodline is really an anomaly in my demon clan's bear clan. After he finished speaking, he actually walked out of the door and left. TSK, isn't your wind leopard clan the same? Xiong Kuei sneered coldly. Then, His eyes narrowed as he pondered over the mysteries of this huge deal. A moment later, he mocked, "That trash is most probably a fool. With so much money, wouldn't it be better to use it to expand the army? Or perhaps, he could have won over a few powerhouses to protect his life." Yet, he chose to buy these low-grade medicinal pills. It was truly incomparably stupid. From the auction hall, under the knife-like gazes, when he walked out, Zhong Shou had 4 earth energy pills in his hands. He bought them at the base price, using a total of 6,000 grade 4 mind stones. The human pinnacle pill could allow a person who didn't know martial arts to enter Xiantian in a short few years. Not only was his foundation really firm, but it could also extend his lifespan by 100 years. Normally it was around 1,500 grade 4 mind stones. The effects of this earth energy pill were slightly stronger and the effects were really quick. As long as one was an earth chakra expert and below 7 meridians, anyone who ate it could easily open up a meridian. Xiantian masters below 3 meridians could open up 2 to 3 meridians. The average price should be around 2,500 grade 4 spirit stones. The price was really expensive, and basically only Xuanwu masters who wanted to break through would buy it. Donglin Cloud Continent only had less than 40 pills that flowed out each year. Even those shrines and sects didn't have many. Even large sects like Pill Fountain Sect, which was famous for their pill refining, would only open their furnace once every 2 years. Each furnace would produce less than 49 pills. In the auction just now, the auctioneer started at 1,500 and thought that these earth energy pills could be sold for at least 10,000. In the end, when Zhong Shou bid, no one dared to compete with him. He directly bid a few beast crystals more than the base price and got the earth energy pill. "Young master, you are such a bully." Chushua's eyes were smiling like crescent moons. "I saw that those few people just now were so angry that they went crazy. It's just that the clothes look familiar, they look like Feng Shu." Zhong Shou laughed out loud. To be able to have extra earth energy pills to auction here. Apart from that Pill Fountain sect, who else could it be? However, the people of this era were really honest and didn't even have any support. Or maybe they didn't expect such a thing to happen and weren't prepared. This time, it was truly a pleasant surprise. Hu Zhongyuan stared at the pill in Zhong Shou's hand, his eyes shining, saliva dripping down from the corner of his mouth. Zhong Shou smiled, waving an earth energy pill in front of Hu Zhongyuan. "If you dare to eat now, I will give you one." At first, Hu Zhong was pleasantly surprised. However, after a short moment, he lowered his head in incomparable dejection. Without a picture, he really didn't dare to eat it. He could only look on as Zhong Shou casually kept those few earth energy pills into his sleeves, feeling really regretful. Following which the expressions of the surrounding people turned solemn. Hu Zhongyuan's expression also turned serious as he looked forward. In front of him, there were tens of people with extraordinary auras, all looking at Zhong Shou with shining eyes. 2 of them had just met not long ago. They were Yunxia Mountain's Feng Yu and Blazing Flame Mountain's Xiong Kuei. However, at this moment they were all smiling, not as cold as before, showing the face of a businessman. The positions of these 2 people were slightly at the back. The few people in front were either Xuanwu masters with high cultivation or returned to Sun Realm spirit masters with strong soul power. Their auras were all retracted. If it was as expected, these people were most probably the few hidden sects who were in charge of matters within Jiefu City. The ones at the front were 2 people who smiled and nodded towards Zhong Shou. Pill Fountain Sect Outer Sect Deacon Fang Chen greets the prince. The other person opened his mouth at the same time. "I am Kongqi Sect Outer Sect Deacon Xiaohan. I am here for the prince's business." Zhong Shou was instantly delighted. From when he released the news till now, only 4 hours had passed. The reactions of these people were really quick. He didn't have much to say to these people. The location of the transaction was directly chosen at Sanlu Bank. Through the bank, one would have to take 1% of the commission. However, it was better in terms of safety. The pills that he bought could be directly stored within the bank. There was no need to discuss the price. In Zhong Shou's hands, he held 90 grade 7 beast crystals and soul stones. There were also many grade 6 mind stones. They were all things that martial cultivators and spirit masters drooled over. As for those basic pills, they were things that many powers were in a rush to sell. Even if they wanted to raise the price, they couldn't, directly lowering the market price by 30% to buy them in bulk. If they didn't want to sell, then scram. They would rather not do business with them. Naturally, at this moment, such a huge amount of spiritual pills couldn't be transported over in such a short amount of time. What Zhong Shou liked the most were the hidden sects with small heaven and earth bags, which were easy to transport. The powers of the cloud continent cities were the most disliked. Large cities like Blazing Flame Mountain and Yunxia Mountain were okay. As for the small cities, they were scattered and didn't need to think about transporting pills to Jiefu City. Luckily, Sanlu Bank had many branches, a total of 100 spread out all over Donglin Cloud Continent. As long as the pills were transported to the branch within 5 days, the transaction would be considered complete. However, with that, the bank would naturally need to take a cut. This made Zhong Shou furious. He directly lowered the price of the bulk goods by 5% before he was satisfied. Only the gazes of these people made him annoyed. Before the transaction, they were all trying to get on his good side. After the transaction was completed, their expressions were filled with unspeakable mocking intent. Especially that pill fountain sect outer sect Deacon Fang Chen, who directly sold close to 500 million basic spiritual pills. The pill master strength of the sect was undeniable. According to the legends, there were 50,000 outer sect disciples who had reached the level of Tier 1 alchemist. That number was most likely true. When the mind stones were in his hands, Fang Chen didn't even try to hide it. Apart from disdain, there was also the joy of taking revenge. It was like he was still brooding over the matter of the 4 earth energy pills. Only now did he take revenge. My pill fountain sect already knows about the prince being made the young master of Xian Mountain City. That Xianyuan city lord is really muddle-headed. He actually wants to marry junior sister Iran to you, such a fool. Our pill fountain sect definitely won't acknowledge this marriage. Prince, take care of yourself. Hey, if your father knew that the money he left was squandered by you, who knows if he would be so furious that he would jump out of the oblivion cloud ocean. After he finished, he scoffed, looking down on Zhong Shou with a sense of superiority before leaving. Zhong Shou felt weird. Did that Fang Shu not rush back to pill fountain sect? Was it the work of those 2 fellows? Speaking of which, a few years later, his cheap father really did jump out of the oblivion cloud ocean. Then, the foundations of Lingyun's sect in Dongling Cloud Continent were totally destroyed. Out of all the people in the bank who participated in the transaction, only an old servant of the bank didn't show any disdain. This was an old man around 70. His aura was something that Zhong Shou couldn't see through. He had been sizing up Zhong Shou with deep shock and a probing expression. When no one was paying attention, he shook his head and said, "The Crown Prince is indeed, as Manor Head Yen said, extraordinary. Your martial path and spiritual cultivation have actually reached such a realm. Even his business acumen was impressive. Why are the people of this world all blind?" To be continued. The people of this world are all blind. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.